A guy dies from overworking, gets reincarnated into a cultivation world, and decides he'll never lift a finger again. While everyone dreams of getting an overpowered system, he literally rejects his own system multiple times because it sounds like disguised slave labor. But the system becomes so desperate to get a host that it evolves into something completely ridiculous, an invincible laying down system. Yep, the protagonist literally gets stronger by breathing, relaxing, and doing absolutely nothing. The guy jumps straight into the Emperor realm without training, gains insane techniques while chilling under a tree, and even makes empresses, sects, and legendary cultivators kneel before him without understanding what's happening. And without further ado, let's get into the video because this is absolute cinema. A young man was lying in the middle of a forest under a tree, completely happy because he did not need to cultivate or fight in the palace, and he even had his own establishment. His life after being reborn in that world was extremely relaxing, exactly the way he liked it. Suddenly, a tiny woman appeared in front of him, saying that she was his spiritual assistant and that he needed to contact her to start his tasks. But the protagonist refused, saying that he did not want to and told her to go away. The poor thing became upset and asked why he was rejecting her, since she was there to help him dominate the world of cultivation. The young man looked at her and pointed out that he knew the nature of that kind of system and that she truly was impressive. However, the truth was that all of that was about endless torture, with those rankings and arrogant people everywhere. In his past life, he had worked himself to death, and now that he had come back to life, she wanted him to go back to working for a system again. And that was not going to happen. The spiritual assistant insisted, begging him to give her a chance and promising to work hard to improve. But the protagonist kept the same thought, saying that working was out of the question and that he would never work again in his entire life. His assistant became confused, asking if the host was rejecting her because she was not working hard enough, and if that meant she needed to become stronger. After evolving her system, she went to him again, saying that the strongest cheat system had been updated, and the required task for beginners was to bang their head against a wall. Because of that, he needed to get ready and bind himself to her to begin. But once again, the protagonist refused, saying that he had a fear of pain and that she needed to find someone else. He thought that he could not even have peace while relieving himself, and that system was being extremely annoying. She tried again with another update, telling him to bind himself to her, enter the gate of the spiritual sword sect, and receive exclusive rewards. He refused again, asking how that was any different from clocking in at work. The spiritual assistant became upset, wondering why she was always being rejected, and the only conclusion was that she was not working hard enough. She decided to try one more time and ran over to him, but the protagonist interrupted her before she could say anything, saying that he did not even want to hear it. But his spiritual assistant said that this time, the system had been upgraded into the best invincible lying down system. He only needed to bind himself to her to receive countless rewards. This caught his attention, and the protagonist asked if he had heard correctly and if the system was only about lying down. She said yes, because that was the best invincible lying down system. After the two of them bound themselves together, he would become invincible in the cultivation world just by lying down. The protagonist said that this really was impressive and asked if she was not trying to trick him into binding himself, only to then make him work himself to death like a fat pig. His assistant raised her hand, saying that it was an oath and that if she deceived him, she would freeze because of an error. The protagonist thought that the system really did seem very sincere and that maybe he should give it a try. He told her that he would agree and trust her this time. As soon as the two began the binding, she congratulated the host because he had successfully bound himself to the system and, because of that, had received his first reward, Emperor Potential. He was currently in the mortal Emperor state, initial stage. The protagonist was impressed and asked if he had really understood correctly because, apparently, he had jumped straight from the mortal realm to the Emperor realm. His spiritual assistant continued announcing, saying that it had been detected that the host was breathing, so he would immediately receive a realm advancement as a reward and a primordial Tao fruit. He went from the initial Emperor stage to the second Emperor stage. The protagonist continued to be surprised because just by breathing, he had already advanced an entire realm, and this really was an invincible lying down system. He began releasing an absurd amount of energy and shouted, saying that he was already at the second Emperor stage, so he no longer needed to hold himself back. That amount of energy was so overwhelming that kilometers away, inside a city, it caught everyone's attention. One of the young men felt that tremor and asked what was happening, and whether the spiritual sect was perhaps about to face a disaster. Another young man ordered them to immediately ring the bell to summon the 9 souls and gather all the elders in the main hall for an emergency meeting, since the power being displayed belonged to a new emperor who had just appeared, and the last time that happened was 500 years ago. Because of that, they needed to quickly investigate which sect or school this new emperor belonged to. In Xuanji Palace in the Great Shang Dynasty, they shouted that they had just glimpsed the secret of the heavens and needed to report to the empress immediately. This new emperor's name was Wang Yang, and he was in the spiritual sword sect. Everyone, let's change the system's name to Tang Ping. Yang was sitting there saying that if things had been this good in his past life, it would have been much better because he had lived 26 years without even holding a girl's hand. His assistant appeared, saying that she had detected that the host wanted to find a Tao companion so she could display the available targets at that moment. The protagonist was impressed, asking if the invincible system could help with that too. Ying said that she had filtered the most interesting targets for him so he could choose. But the protagonist said that it did not work that way because they did not need to talk about which one he would choose, since he had to win them over, and that was too much work. Ying asked him not to forget to claim his rewards from the Tao companion mission. Yang became a little confused and asked the system to wait a moment because he had not even gone after anyone yet, so why did he already have a reward? But suddenly, news arrived that Empress Ye Linlang of the Great Shang Dynasty was requesting an audience with Emperor Yang. Meanwhile, in the palace, the person leading the meeting asked Elder Bai Fang if the sect had any elder named Wang Yang. Fang pointed out that he had never heard of him. Besides, he had read the records of the entire sect and found no one with that name. The other man beside him explained that perhaps the protagonist was some disciple who had not been registered in the spiritual sword sect. One of the young men present said that he had just remembered that the ancestral founder had a master named Wang. Fang stood up and shouted, saying that it made perfect sense, and that this Wang Yang was probably the true ancestral founder, who had been hiding his identity and protecting the spiritual sword sect until now. The person leading the meeting asked Chang Feng to go welcome the empress, while the rest of the spiritual sect had to follow him to greet the ancestor on their knees. A short time later, they went to the protagonist, and everyone knelt down, greeting the founding ancestor. The protagonist became a little confused and asked Ying if this was also some kind of system reward. She explained that this was spontaneous behavior and was not related to the system. He thinks that in that case, he will just let things flow and asks everyone to stand up, as they do not need to be so formal. The leader of the group, calling the protagonist the founding ancestor, says that the empress of the Shang dynasty wishes to speak with him, asking if he knows why, and the protagonist replies that she is probably there to propose marriage. The woman who was with the group is surprised, asking how that is possible, while other members of the group say that it is shocking and ask if they heard correctly, stating that there is no precedent for such a thing. Yang looked at all of them and said that the empress was there, so he should go greet her. Meanwhile, somewhere else, the empress was sitting in a chair, asking if it was possible that the new emperor did not want to meet her. Changfeng said that the founder had been meditating behind the mountains, so she only needed to wait a moment, and he should arrive soon. The protagonist arrived, and the empress noticed that his aura and clothing did not resemble those of a legendary emperor. This made her think that perhaps the prophecy of the royal council was wrong. The protagonist realized that he had completely forgotten to change before meeting the empress. He asked Ying to give him an impressive set of equipment because he needed to improve his image. Ying said that she had just detected that the meeting task had been completed, and the reward he had received was a set of imperial dragon armor. Lin Lang was impressed by the new outfit and thought that the protagonist was indeed an emperor, and that his realm was far higher than hers. She bowed before him and introduced herself, saying that her name was Lin Lang and that she was the empress. She was there to humbly ask him to save the great Shang dynasty. The protagonist was surprised, wondering if she was the same empress who had conquered the 6 nations. He asked her to rise and said that he understood the difficulties she was going through. However, he pointed out that he had lived in seclusion for years, precisely to avoid worldly matters. But the empress continued insisting and said that if the protagonist could save the great dynasty, she would accept any condition. The young man from before thought that the empress was making a great sacrifice. Even so, the protagonist was still a little reluctant to accept. Lin Lang noticed this and said that if the emperor did not mind, she could offer herself to him. Fang and the young man beside him were impressed because the empress was offering herself, and this was the biggest news in the cultivation world. Yang thought that although he was tempted by the empress's offer, accepting it might still bring him many problems in the future. Ying informed her master that the empress possessed the extremely rare and immortal phoenix physique. The protagonist, still confused, asked the system if there was anything special about it. Ying explained that if a cultivator engaged in dual cultivation with someone who possessed the immortal phoenix physique, he would instantly advance an entire realm. Yang remained thoughtful because, even with great risks, she continued insisting and had made an oath to the heavenly Tao. So if she went back on her word, she would suffer the wrath of the heavens. She thought that, on top of all that, the protagonist was an extremely talented person, so she did not mind making that sacrifice. Yang took a deep breath and agreed, saying that if that was the case, then she could show him the way because he was getting an empress as a wife for free, and he did not know where else he could find an offer as good as that. Lin Lang knelt once again, saying that, on behalf of the billions of citizens of the great dynasty, she thanked the emperor. The young man told the protagonist that the spiritual sword sect could not survive without him, because if their enemies took advantage of that situation, it would be an unprecedented catastrophe. Ying detected that the sect master was asking for the host's help. The protagonist agreed to help, and the system congratulated him for obtaining the imperial-grade array formation, 9 Heavens Spiritual Swords. Yang thought that the system really was very generous because it was offering him an imperial-grade array. He created the formation in his hand, and the sect master was impressed. The protagonist explained that this was the 9 Heavens Spiritual Formation. When activated, it would guarantee the sect's safety. He activated the array, and the sword flew out over the entire place. Several other swords began to appear, and all of them created a shield around the entire sect. Everyone was impressed because that was an imperial-grade formation. With this, the spiritual sword sect would rise to greatness once again, because the ancestral master's abilities were beyond imagination. Lin Lang watched and thought that those 9 Heavens spiritual swords were stronger than the defense of the imperial order, and it seemed that the founder of the spiritual sword sect truly was impressive. Qing Yao knelt in front of the protagonist and begged him to allow her to serve by his side. The protagonist looked at the empress, who did not have a very happy expression after hearing that. He thought that yet another girl was throwing herself at him, and apparently that place was turning into a battlefield and becoming more and more difficult. Ying congratulated her master again, saying that Liu Qingyao also possessed the rare resonance spiritual physique, which only appeared once every 10,000 years. He asked the system to explain what was special about that resonance spiritual physique. Ying said that a person with that sacred body was loyal, reliable, attentive, and shared a deep connection with their masters. Yang said that sounded more like the sacred body of a maid. Ying said that this was only expected of the host because his evaluation was correct. He accepted her, saying that from that moment on she would stay by his side. Qingyao was happy with that news and thanked the ancestral master deeply. The protagonist began laughing and thought that having a maid by his side was not bad at all. The sect master thought that, as expected, the ancestral master still valued old relationships, and with that, Qingyao's future would be limitless. The empress asked where the phoenix carriage was. Suddenly, the carriage began flying overhead, and the people were impressed because that was a legendary immortal-grade vehicle, the Rainbow Phoenix Carriage. That treasure was on the same level as an emperor-grade item, which made it even more impressive. Yang stared at it and thought that the treasures of the cultivation world were incredibly beautiful. Now that he stopped to think about it, he had never bought a car in his past life. Ying detected that the host desired a vehicle and congratulated him for obtaining a carriage. Suddenly, a carriage with several guards appeared. That was the 6 Imperial Dragon's carriage. As soon as the carriage stopped, the 2 guards greeted their new master. The people could not believe that this was the legendary Emperor-grade carriage. Yang asked his future wife and empress to enter first. As soon as the 3 of them boarded the carriage, Yang said that they needed to leave immediately for the great Shang dynasty. Meanwhile, a woman was trying to maintain the array, asking everyone to calm their minds, because even if it cost them all their cultivation, they needed to hold on until Her Majesty returned. However, most of the residents were in a panic, shouting for everyone to run immediately because the Zhuanwei Empire was about to break through the array. Outside, 2 cultivators were trying to break the array. Jiang Yunqi, one of the 4 generals of Xuanyue, complained, saying that the formation seemed weak, but they could not break it, and that was frustrating. Song Tieyi, another member of the 4 generals, pointed out that he had not expected the empress to have such formidable tactics. Yunqi was confused and asked why he was saying that. Tieyi explained that the empress had reduced the range to the surroundings of the capital, which strengthened the imperial defense array. He asked Yunqi to keep attacking the array while he dealt with the rest. The woman from before was already reaching her limit and apologized to Her Majesty, but that was the most she could hold. Tieyi activated Dragon Ascension to attack, but the 2 of them were surprised when they felt an extremely powerful sword aura. They looked up, and the protagonist was preparing to counterattack. Yunqi asked who the idiot was that dared to interfere in their affairs. Tieyi, on the other hand, became a little frightened and showed respect because he saw 6 dragons pulling the carriage. That meant the person inside had to be extremely powerful. Politely, he asked if he could know who the person before them was. Lin Lang introduced the protagonist, saying that he was Emperor Wang Yang of the Spiritual Sword Sect. Yunchi continued acting arrogantly, asking what sect that was because he had never heard of it and it must be nothing more than a tiny third-rate sect. Qingyao became furious at that comment and shouted, asking how he dared to insult the spiritual sword sect. Yunchi replied that a brat at the nascent soul stage had no right to speak as an equal with those in the Emperor realm. Ying told the protagonist that, because his sect had been insulted, the host had been rewarded with the Saint-grade art, stellar technique of heaven and earth. Yang began laughing and asked why the two of them did not do him a favor. Yunqi, still irritated, shouted at the protagonist asking who he thought he was to talk about favors with them. But Tie, who had already realized what was in front of them, asked his companion to calm down and called the protagonist fellow cultivator, saying that they were there under orders to take the Empress, so he would like to politely ask him not to interfere in that matter. Yang released his aura and asked what would happen if he refused to accept that. Ying sensed the increase in the host's killing intent, and because of that he received a reward. The stellar technique of heaven and earth had reached its maximum level of mastery. Tiai said that if that was the case, then they could not be blamed for acting ruthlessly. Yang asked Ying to explain what the stellar technique of heaven and earth did. She said that this technique could absorb attacks from the same realm and then reflect them with twice the power. After learning how his technique worked, the protagonist looked at the two of them and said that they were not worthy of making him move, so he would stand still there and let them make 3 moves. If they managed to even touch his body, then they could do whatever they wanted with the Empress. Lin Lang became worried and asked what the Emperor was planning to do. Qingyao also asked her master not to be so reckless because those two were truly strong. But the protagonist interrupted both of them, telling them to be quiet and not worry, because those two would not be able to do absolutely anything to him. Yunqi prepared to attack, saying that if the protagonist could withstand at least 3 blows, then they would leave. Yang told them to begin. Yunqi tried to attack, however, he realized that something strange had happened, because 90% of his power had disappeared as if it were nothing, which showed that this guy had some skills. However, he did not let himself be intimidated by that and tried to attack again, using the terrifying God Fist third form, Dragon Fist breaking the void. The attack was truly powerful, but once again, it did absolutely nothing to the protagonist. Yang asked if that was all they had to show and if the realm they were in was merely status. Yunqi became even more furious, feeling humiliated. Tiai told his companion not to use any more moves, however, it was already too late. Yunqi transformed using the Heavenly King enchantment, Divine Buddha Palm. The protagonist activated the stellar technique of Heaven and Earth Dharma Body. Yunqi landed a direct blow. Qingyao realized that her ancestral master was truly very powerful. The Empress pointed out that he had taken a powerful attack from an emperor using a Dharma body, which meant that perhaps his strength could be beyond the emperor realm. Yang activated the reversal and Yunqi received twice the damage he had inflicted, nearly falling into a coma instantly. Tiai rushed over to hold his companion, but Yunqi kept trying to fight, saying that Guy had definitely used some tricks, so he refused to accept this defeat and emphasized that he wanted to try 3 more blows. Tiai asked him to stop being reckless, because his body had already suffered absurd damage. Yang walked over to the two of them, saying that Yunqi had already failed his attempt, so Tiai could try. Tiai refused, thanked the protagonist for showing mercy, and emphasized that the two of them would keep their previous word and withdraw immediately. As soon as the two left, Qingyao asked if her master was hurt, but he told her not to worry, explaining that he was fine and had not suffered any injuries. The Empress praised him, saying that the technique he had just used was phenomenal. Yang thanked her and explained that it was nothing to him. Lin Lang emphasized that the great dynasty was now indebted to the emperor's kindness, so she was very grateful. They would have a banquet later at the imperial palace, and she would like to have the honor of their presence. Yang said that since it was a direct invitation from the empress, there was no way he could refuse. As soon as the two went inside the sect, everyone went to welcome the empress. She explained that the protagonist was Emperor Wang Yang of the spiritual sword sect, and that he would soon be crowned as the great sovereign of the great Shang dynasty. They were shocked by this news, and after learning that the protagonist would become sovereign, everyone knelt and greeted His Majesty and the new king. But Yang, still lost, asked the system what exactly the position of sovereign was. Ying congratulated him for accepting the work of the people of the great dynasty, and because of that he had earned merit points. Yang became irritated with Ying and asked what merit points were and whether she had secretly added some kind of mission to the system without telling him, because if she did not tell him the truth immediately, he would find some way to unbind himself from her. Ying became frightened and said that there was nothing like that, but the protagonist remained angry with her and ordered her to immediately explain what merit points were, because in the normal cultivation world, no such thing existed. Ying asked him to calm down a little and let her explain everything clearly. The protagonist let her go, and she began explaining that merit points were generated by admiration and working for others. Doing good deeds, saving lives, or serving the country, all of that would bring merit points. Yang asked if that meant being a good person already made him even stronger, because if that really was the result, why would he need to work? Ying continued explaining that gathering a large amount of wishes was not easy, but kings and high-ranking officials, because they were respected, could gain merits quickly. And if he used merits to form a Dharma body, he could become stronger than the nascent soul realm from the very beginning. The protagonist finally understood and looked at the Empress, saying that apparently she had formed her Dharma body through merits. Ying said no because the Empress was a rare dual cultivator. Linlang noticed that he was a little too serious and asked if he did not like the capital. The protagonist said that was not it, because he was only remembering the past. He thought that the value of that Empress kept increasing more and more. As they walked through the capital, all the residents kept wishing them long life and kneeling, because that mysterious expert had saved the capital and had an immortal aura. Qingyao kept looking at her new master and thought that he was very handsome, so she should stay by his side, even if it was only as a servant. Suddenly, a man knelt near the Empress and she became irritated. The man said that the Grand Counselor was being sent back to the Heavenly Secret Pavilion. Yang calmed Linlang, asking why they did not visit the Grand Counselor first. She apologized for losing her composure. The woman who had been maintaining the array earlier was the Grand Counselor. Several people were gathered around her bed, begging her not to leave them and emphasizing that she could not remain injured. The Empress opened the door, apologizing to her master, saying that she had arrived too late. The counselor looked at the Empress and asked how many more times she would have to ask her to call her Grand Counselor in public. The protagonist looked at her and thought that it was truly a pity for such a beautiful woman to die like that. The counselor thanked Yang for saving the Empress and the entire dynasty. Lin Lang shouted for everyone to summon the immortal doctor to heal the Grand Counselor immediately. But the counselor refused, saying there was no need to do that because, in her current condition, only a 9-cycle rebirth pill from the superior immortal realm could save her. Ying appeared once again, saying that she had detected that someone needed treatment, so the host would receive that supreme-grade 9-cycle rebirth pill. The protagonist emphasized that the system knew very well how to cause trouble. He held the pill in his hand and hesitated, wondering whether he should keep that pill or use it immediately to try to save that woman's life. Yang asked the Empress not to be sad because he had the pill they needed to save her. He thought that saving lives came first and that it would be a pity for a beauty like that to die. Lin Lang was flattered, saying that the pill was extremely valuable, so she would like to thank him again. The other two were happy to see that their master would be saved. As soon as Lin Lang placed the pill in the Grand Counselor's mouth, she woke up, and an exponential energy began to grow inside her body. The protagonist was impressed because that pill truly had special effects, and it was no wonder it could only be found in the superior immortal realm. Lin Lang asked her master if she was all right because, apparently, she had advanced a realm. The counselor went over to the protagonist and thanked him, saying that thanks to the pill he had bestowed upon her, she had not only healed all her injuries, but had also advanced to the intermediate stage of the Immortal King realm. Yang asked her not to mention it because it was only a simple matter and there was no need to cause so much trouble. Suddenly, another person entered the room, telling the Empress that the banquet was ready. Lin Lang asked Yang to join them at the banquet. A short time later, already seated at the table, he was a little worried because he had not drunk alcohol since being reborn in that world, so he wanted to know how strong that drink could be. Ying said that she had just detected that the host would drink alcohol, so he needed to receive the Emperor-grade technique called the Wine Dragon Qi technique. This technique converted alcohol, medicinal potency, or poison into true qi, greatly increasing the body's reaction speed. The protagonist was happy because now he could drink and eat without worrying. The Empress stood up, saying that this first cup of wine came from herself and the Heavenly Secret Pavilion, thanking the Emperor for the pill that saved the Grand Counselor. She drank the wine and said that with this second cup of wine on behalf of all the citizens of the Great Dynasty, she would toast the Great Emperor, thanking him for saving the Great Dynasty. And with the third, she would toast the Emperor once more because from now on he would be the sovereign of the Great Shang Dynasty. The citizens present were shocked because sovereign meant exactly that. Even if it was sudden, it meant that the Great Dynasty would have 2 experts in the Emperor realm, so no one would dare look down on them again in the future. Lin Lang asked everyone to be silent because she had already spoken with the Grand Counselor to choose a specific day for her wedding with the protagonist. Qingyao interrupted the Empress, saying that this was a major event and could not be rushed like that. Lin Lang emphasized that she had made a heavenly oath not to marry anyone other than Emperor Yang. So what right did she, a mere junior, have to oppose that decision? Qingyao stood firm and shouted at the empress, explaining that she was not opposing her marriage to her master. However, she wanted to emphasize that weddings required proper rituals and ceremonies. If the great Shang dynasty handled everything, it would make it seem as if the spiritual sword sect was neglecting the ancestral master. Meanwhile, the protagonist simply sat there, drinking his wine and thinking that watching two beauties argue was very entertaining. So that trip had been well worth it. Ying warned that she had detected that the protagonist was about to get married, so she was preparing a special wedding gift. Yang told the system to shut up and emphasized that the wedding had not even been confirmed yet, so why was she in such a hurry? Suddenly, someone entered the hall saying that he had heard an expert had arrived in the great Shang dynasty, so the left prime minister of the Xuanyue dynasty, named Qi Wenyuan, was there to meet him. The empress stood up in fright, saying that she had not expected them to send Prime Minister Qi Wenyuan, because apparently the heavens wanted the great Shang dynasty to perish. The protagonist asked what the cultivation level was of the prime minister they were talking so much about. The counselor explained that the Xuanyue dynasty had existed for 1,000 years. Currently, they have one emperor, two ministers, and four generals, totaling 7 experts in the emperor realm. This Qi Wenyuan is one of the ministers, known as the left minister. Yang remained calm, saying that Guy was only at the emperor level, so why were they panicking so much? Lin Lang explained that this man was not frightening because of his strength, but because he was the #1 strategist of the Xuanyue dynasty, since he was a master of planning and never failed his missions. He could destroy nations, or save them with just a thought. Yang asked Ying what Qi Wenyuan's true realm was. She apologized, however. She explained that this was not within her detection range, so she could not obtain that information. The protagonist told her not to worry because he was sure they would soon meet this person. However, no one entered the hall. The protagonist said that perhaps that expert did not want to meet him or was looking down on him. Lin Lang asked the protagonist to leave immediately because he should not involve himself any further in Sheng's worldly affairs. Because if this continued, perhaps she would only be able to repay her debt in her next life. The counselor reprimanded the empress, saying that she should not do that kind of thing because if she let the protagonist leave, then the billions of citizens in that place would fall into eternal damnation. Qingyao warned her master that Xuanyue was truly no joke and asked why they did not return to the spiritual sword sect immediately. The protagonist said that he had barely managed to drink his second cup of wine and someone was already there to cause trouble, and this was becoming unbearable. He stood up to speak with the empress, but the counselor stepped forward and knelt down, saying that national ruler Yang was truly compassionate for saving the great Shang dynasty at that critical moment. Everyone began to worship him, saying that his benevolence was incomparable, a true fortune for the great Shang dynasty, and a blessing for its people. Yang thought that he had been too slow and now there was nothing else he could do. The empress reprimanded all her people, saying that the emperor was only a guest. So how could they force him to defend everyone like that? Yang told her not to be angry because since it was the prime minister, he could not trouble him and he would be back soon. Lin Lang was happy, saying that there was no way to repay such great kindness, so they could only await the great emperor's triumphant return. Meanwhile, outside the array, Wenyuan was tired of waiting and prepared to attack, saying that it seemed this place preferred to suffer rather than cooperate. He was about to attack, but the protagonist approached, asking him to wait a moment. Wenyuan asked the protagonist if he was Emperor Wang Yang. The protagonist said that he was only a small cultivator unworthy of the left minister's attention. Wenyuan was impressed and thought that the protagonist had destroyed Yungqi's incredible martial arts body with one move, yet he seemed very humble, which showed that he was an extremely strong person. He looked at the protagonist and told him that he seemed very humble and very strong at the same time. Because of that, he would like to invite him to go to the Xuanyue dynasty, because if he agreed to join them, then the protagonist would have a status equal to Wenyuan's. But Yang refused, saying that unfortunately he was only a rude man from the mountains, so he could not accept a generous salary from the upper ranks. Besides, Yang emphasized that Wenyuan also seemed to be a very sensible person, so he also knew there was no need to damage the relationship between Xuanyue and Sheng. Wenyuan said that Empress Lin Lang had destroyed 6 kingdoms in a row, eliminating many people, so they were only defending justice. The protagonist agreed. However, he emphasized that although the unification of the 6 countries had been very fierce, there had been no war since then, and that was a great merit. Wenyuan praised the protagonist, saying that he had excellent dialogue and a good mind. However, he had received an order to arrest the empress and take her away. Yang emphasized that he respected Wenyuan greatly as a person. However, on that day, They would only talk about pleasant matters and would not create conflict. Wen Yuan explained that conflict between the two nations was inevitable, but if the protagonist had any other solution, he could feel free to speak. Yang agreed, saying that a battle between gentlemen did not necessarily need to be fought with swords, but also with words. Wen Yuan pointed out that if the protagonist lost using words, he could not later say that it was unfair. However, the protagonist was already thinking that later, he would use Chinese poetry to defeat his opponent. Wen Yuan created a game, saying that they could make a bet, and if the protagonist happened to win, then he promised that he would no longer deal with the Empress's matter. But Yang realized that his opponent was not acting with common sense, because he did not know how to play Go. This game is an abstract strategy board game for two players, whose objective is to surround more territory than the opponent. Ying warned that the protagonist was preparing to play Go, so the AlphaGo system had been activated. Yang asked if this system was the same one used to play games on Earth. She said yes, but this was an authentic and updated version. With that, he could defeat the best players in the world, even with a 3-stone handicap. A handicap is a form of betting that gives an advantage or disadvantage to one of the competitors. After hearing that, the protagonist felt a little more relieved, saying that now his skills could dominate the world. He accepted the challenge, saying that in this case it was very difficult to back down, and asked Wen Yuan to make the first move. Wen Yuan asked if the protagonist was really going to give him the first move. Yang asked who had said he would only give him the first move and emphasized that he could make 2 moves ahead. Wen Yuan felt a little embarrassed and asked if the protagonist was trying to insult him, because his skills in that game were known throughout all the realms. Yang focused and emphasized that the words of a gentleman could not be taken back, so if his opponent won, he would accept any punishment. Wen Yuan agreed and put his sword into the wager, saying that if he lost, then that Mo Yun Tianzu's sword would belong to the protagonist, and he would leave immediately. Ying warned that the system was loading the game data. A short time later, the system counted the number of white moves and deduced that the percentage was at a 99.9% chance of victory. The protagonist was impressed, seeing that the system truly was very intelligent, and apparently, he really could win this. Meanwhile, the residents were watching that scene, asking if the emperor was really playing Go with the left prime minister, because this was madness since it was impossible to win. When Wen Yuan played alone against the Xuanyue dynasty, he defeated all 18 national players, so his strength in that game was truly terrifying. The Empress reprimanded everyone who was commenting on it, telling them not to say anything else, because the Emperor would return triumphant, and that was a fact. Qingyao thought that the ancestral master might even win that game, which showed that he was very versatile. The counselor was still a little frightened because the protagonist was facing a top-tier player and had even given him a 2-piece advantage. This was unprecedented, but she hoped nothing would go wrong. Meanwhile, in the game, Wen Yuan was incredulous, because every move the protagonist made contained extraordinary skill. Yang was satisfied because it was exactly as the rumors said. He was being dominant, and a novice like him could easily surpass experts. Wen Yuan still could not believe that even with a 2-stone advantage, he was losing, which showed that the protagonist's chess skills were incomparable. The people remained anxious, asking why the minister had not sent any signal yet, because perhaps he was too addicted to that game. But the truth was that Wen Yuan was already cornered, not knowing what to do, because the protagonist was predicting every step he took. Besides, he did not know why the protagonist's mind was not in that game, and perhaps he already knew what was happening. Yang made his next move and said that now the game had come to an end, thanking him very much for giving him this honorable opportunity for the two of them to face each other. Wen Yuan kept questioning how that was possible because he had lost even with a 2-stone advantage. Yang became a little scared by his opponent's reaction. He thought that this was just a game, so there was no need for him to act like that since it was only a game and there was no need for so much drama. Ying congratulated the protagonist, saying that through the game his opponent's soul had been damaged and his realm had fallen to the immortal king realm. Yang became confused, asking why it seemed like something was wrong. She explained that there had been an error and the rewards could not be obtained. The protagonist asked if this was some kind of joke and if she was trying to make him laugh himself to death. Yang thanked his opponent again for the game. Suddenly, Tiayi and another man appeared, attempting a sneak attack. A great explosion occurred, however. The protagonist had created a shield to protect himself, so he did not suffer a single scratch. The bearded man explained that there was definitely a turtle shell protecting the protagonist, so they needed to try again from another angle. They tried to attack again, but the protagonist lost his patience and explained that they were seeking death, so he should not be judged for acting rudely. With the stellar technique of heaven and earth, he threw the two of them back and began releasing even more power. The bearded man was impressed, questioning how that was possible. Wen Yuan interrupted the two of them and said that was enough, ordering them to step back immediately. He apologized to the protagonist, saying that he had overestimated his own abilities, and thanked him for teaching him a lesson. Because of that, they would honor their promise and leave immediately. Young thanked him for his understanding and said they would see each other next time, but there was no need to say goodbye. The bearded man became irritated and asked why the left minister had not joined them to eliminate that threat to his majesty. Wen Yuan emphasized that Yang was incomprehensible and that his abilities might have reached the realm of the Tao of strategy. The bearded man remained confused, asking what was so great about being incredible at a game like Go. Wen Yuan explained that this could be the realm of a sage of the heavenly Tao and asked what he thought that meant. The bearded man was surprised and said that was basically impossible, but Wen Yuan already knew what he was facing, so he needed to return immediately and persuade his majesty not to put a target on the Shang dynasty. If they angered that man, the consequences would be terrible and unimaginable. While the protagonist was returning to the capital, Ying was shouting that she was going to come out while trembling. The protagonist found that a little strange and thought that maybe she had a stomachache, but suddenly she created a crystal, saying that it was finally refined. Yang asked what that crystal was because it did not seem like much. Ying explained that the fragment belonged to the heavenly Tao, and that no matter how exceptional a cultivator's talent was, if he did not understand the fragment of the heavenly Tao, he could not become a Tao sage. The protagonist accepted the explanation and began trying to comprehend that fragment. The amount of energy was so great that a man several kilometers away sensed an extremely powerful aura. He wondered if that could be a fragment of the heavenly Tao. However, the struggle for the great Tao had not begun yet, so how could a fragment have appeared? This made him worried because if a fragment of the heavenly Tao was appearing in the world, then an era of turmoil was certainly about to fall upon them. Another girl began wondering who would claim that fragment because this had been a very long wait. Two other people were also commenting on it. One of them asked if the appearance of the fragment was a trap set by his companion. However, his companion explained that the fragment was the path to becoming a sage, so why would he give up something like that? Meanwhile, the protagonist had been taken somewhere else. He asked what kind of environment that was. The system explained that this was the heavenly Tao altar inside the sea of his consciousness. The fragment's place was at the center of the disc, and in that way, the protagonist would be able to activate its power. Yang threw the fragment onto the altar and it fit perfectly. An overwhelming wave of chi began to emanate from it. He began leveling up rapidly, reaching the path of strategy, 9th rank, hidden wisdom. The protagonist was impressed because not only had his realm evolved, but he had also gained a new level of the heavenly Tao. Ying explained that the 9th rank, hidden wisdom, granted 3 black stones and 3 white stones, and using each one guaranteed different opportunities. The protagonist remained confused, asking what those opportunities were and whether that was for internal or external players, so the system needed to be a little more specific. Ying continued the explanation, saying that it was not for internal or external players. Now that he was a game master, he could use those stones to help or hinder others. Yang said that the game master sounded impressive. Ying continued saying that a game master used the world as a board, all people became pieces, and everything within his reach. Yang interrupted her, telling her to get straight to the point and asking if he had any other power besides playing Go. She explained that currently he was immune to enemy suppression techniques from the same realm and could nullify Emperor realm suppression from supreme beings. Yang was not very happy about that because the protagonists in the works he had always read eliminated their opponents across all realms, so the ability was not very good. He returned to the city and the Empress ran over to him, saying that she had never thought his Go skills would be so magnificent, which showed that her husband was truly revealing. Yang explained that Wen Yuan's heart had been damaged because he lost the match, so his realm had fallen to Immortal King, and he would not cause trouble for the great Shang dynasty for a good while. Once again, all the people began applauding and wishing long life to the new lord. Lin Lang asked someone to bring more wine immediately, because she wanted to toast the sovereign's triumphant return. He picked up one of his pieces and tossed it upward. This caused the array to be strengthened. Ying congratulated him for strengthening the Imperial Protection Array and establishing a connection with it. The system's reward was a sacred-grade sword technique called Sword of the Nine Tribulations. The Grand Counselor noticed that something was happening and asked why it seemed like the Imperial Protection Array had changed. The protagonist finally understood how the White Stones worked. They could turn everyone into pieces, and that meant he could control others. He imagined his wife wearing some other clothes, asking him if those clothes were a little embarrassing. Yang asked the Grand Counselor to remain calm and explained that he had just upgraded the Imperial Protection Array. unless an expert from the Supreme Realm arrived, that array would resist all external enemies. They thought that the Imperial Protection Array had indeed been strengthened, and that apparently the Emperor was incomprehensible, something no one could explain. Meanwhile, in the other dynasty, a man was drinking some wine and said that no one could have thought that even the calculating left minister would lose. A report was delivered to His Majesty saying that the powerful expert named Yang, whom Empress Linlang had invited, was incredibly strong. Because of that, he hoped His Majesty would temporarily stop his actions against the great Shang dynasty. He was Emperor Xuanyue. He became furious and punched the table, shouting that that dynasty was very small and yet they could not even handle this. He ordered them to immediately summon the right minister and have her destroy the great Shang dynasty at once. However, the man remained worried, asking the emperor not to do that because this was now a crucial moment in the north, so he should not ruin a major plan because of a moment of anger. Xuanyue emphasized that nothing was more important than capturing the empress, and if they could not do it, he would personally lead the army to annihilate that Shang dynasty. Meanwhile, in Shang, everyone was cheering for the protagonist, saying that he was the wisest and most powerful lord because he had frightened away the enemy with a simple game, in addition to possessing divine and incomparable skills, expelling the forces of the Xuanyue dynasty with a single move. The counselor told the empress and the protagonist that she had made some calculations, and that in 5 days it would be an auspicious day for the wedding, so she suggested starting the preparations. Lin Lang became a little embarrassed and asked the imperial counselor if she was not being too hasty with the preparations. Since this was an important event, they should first have the Lord's approval. Yang thought that one of them was embarrassed and the other was pale, which made him wonder if he really had any choice. He decided to speak and said that, for this wedding, he could return to the spiritual sword sect to make the preparations. Lin Lang said that he did not need to worry about the wedding preparations because the imperial counselor could take care of everything. Qingyao interfered again, telling the empress and the imperial counselor that they could handle everything inside the Shang dynasty. But the ancestral master still needed to return and prepare the dowry and the welcoming ceremony. Lin Lang agreed because the new lord had just mentioned that this would also be a major event for the spiritual sword sect, so proper preparations needed to be made for that occasion. However, she was still a little worried that the customs of the spiritual sword sect might be different from what the Shang dynasty usually did. She asked the counselor if this could become a problem for the ceremony. The counselor said that the Lord's plan was to return to the spiritual sword sect, so she would like to go with him, because she was the imperial counselor of the great Shang dynasty and was very versatile in wedding preparations. The protagonist thought that this was his first time getting married in that world, so it would be very helpful to bring an expert along with him. He agreed and said that she could go with him to his sect. Before they left, the empress went to the exit and told her new lord that she would miss him greatly, so she wished she could return to the spiritual sword sect with him. Yang laughed and asked why she needed to miss him, because in 5 days they would get married and he would take her home. Lin Lang said that actually she was not ready yet. He asked what she was talking about and questioned whether she meant being his bride or having children. She became embarrassed and asked him to stop making those jokes. It was already getting late, so he needed to leave. As soon as they entered the carriage, the counselor emphasized that the imperial carriage was impressive. Qingyao explained that this was because the Lord was a legendary figure. However, the counselor thought that even a supreme being did not have such a magnificent carriage. So what kind of extraordinary figure could that guy be? She decided to try to find out something and told him that she was a little curious, so she would like to know which Holy Land he came from. Yang asked Ying what Holy Lands existed in that world. The system said that he had asked the right person, because there were 10 Holy Lands in that world. She began naming them, but the protagonist said that was enough. However, he thought that if he said he was affiliated with one of those Holy Lands, he would have problems in the future, so it was better to simply say that he was a cultivator on his own. He explained to her that he was only a solo cultivator and had never belonged to any of the Holy Lands. The counselor was impressed, saying that she would never have imagined he was a solo cultivator because his talent and fortune were truly terrifying. Ying warned the protagonist that they were in big trouble because the array protecting the spiritual sword sect was under attack. This made the protagonist irritated and he questioned who the idiots were that were attacking while he was away. The counselor noticed that the protagonist had become a little more serious and asked if something had happened. He said it was nothing, because his sect might be facing some problems. Meanwhile, at the spiritual sword sect, the attacks continued. One of the people taking part in the attack emphasized that the array was extraordinary, because it remained unshaken even after several attacks. The man behind all of that thought that the spiritual sword sect had always been discreet, so he had never imagined that its protective array would be so formidable, but they needed to bring it down that very day. The attacks kept becoming more and more intense while everyone inside was worried. Feng asked if that array would really be able to withstand so many attacks. Chang Feng emphasized that the array was the ancestral master's protective formation, so it would not be easy. Suddenly, the protagonist arrived, and everyone was happy to see that the ancestral master had returned. But Yang was irritated and asked what was going on there. The sect leader went over to him and said that those cultivators had only been passing by, but somehow they had set their eyes on the spiritual sword sect's protective array. Qing Yao asked which sect dared to offend them. Yang thought that those idiots had been very unlucky because they had gone there only to reserve a spot in the cemetery. Since he was in the middle of preparing for his wedding, he had to deal with those idiots as quickly as possible. He asked the others to take very good care of the Imperial Counselor because he would be right back. He went over to the group of cultivators and asked why those idiots were causing trouble. One of the cultivators became irritated and asked how a brat like the protagonist dared to insult the Feng Yun sect, questioning whether he was not afraid of dying. The cultivator ordered the protagonist to go back immediately and tell his master to hand over the protective array because if that did not happen, when the array fell, they would not leave even a single man alive inside. The protagonist asked if they were there only to kill, rob, and destroy, because apparently all the lackeys would entertain him. He thought that all the others there were just disposable, so perhaps they were there only to be eliminated. The leader told the protagonist that that small sect did not deserve that array, and if they could not take it, others would, so it was better for him to hand it over obediently. That way, they might even leave the protagonist's corpse intact. The protagonist asked the system to check the cultivation level of the two idiots on the other side. Ying said that one was an emperor at the second stage, the second was at the peak of the immortal king realm, and the other was a perfect immortal. Yang could not believe that those useless people still dared to act so shamelessly in front of him with such an insignificant level. But this was a great opportunity because he still had not used the Saint Grade sword technique, so he could test it immediately. He opened the system, found and learned the sword technique, immediately receiving the reward. The sword of the 9 tribulations of heaven and earth reached perfect mastery. He also found and learned the 9 heavenly profound swords technique, raising it to the maximum as well. Yang held his sword and said that he would give them 10 seconds to disappear, otherwise they would all be eliminated instantly. The group leader became irritated, saying that the sect masters of the protagonist sect spoke to him as a venerable one, so he could not believe that after 200 years the spiritual sword sect had produced a useless brat like the protagonist. However, one of the disciples told his master that there was no need to waste words on someone as useless as that. They only needed to eliminate him and then destroy the sect, but the protagonist cut him in half with a single strike, pulverizing his body. The leader was frightened, shouting for his disciple, and asked how the protagonist dared to attack the Feng Yun sect. But Yang had already run out of patience and said that they had offended his sect, and that was an unforgivable act, which meant they had just met death. The leader, irritated, said that the protagonist had killed his disciple, so he, Lingji Zhenren, would eliminate the protagonist and completely eradicate the sect. Yang asked if he really had the ability to do that, because if that was the occasion, then he would also be sent to hell along with his disciple. One of the young men asked his senior brother not to act impulsively, because the protagonist was at least at the Great Emperor stage and they needed to act cautiously. Zhenren said that they needed to quickly set up the boundless formation of the 3 realms to eliminate that idiot and avenge his disciple. They began preparing for the attack, activating the boundless formation. The protagonist's realm dropped to the initial Immortal King stage and Zhenren tried to attack, saying that he would be killed now, but Yang asked if they really thought they could suppress his cultivation with that trash formation, because they were nothing more than great fools. With ease, he broke the formation and returned to the 4th stage of the Great Emperor realm. Everyone was frightened, saying that the protagonist's cultivation had returned to normal, and now they did not know what to do. Shenren was surprised, thinking how that could be possible because, unless the protagonist was at the supreme stage, he should not be able to escape. He asked his companions not to panic because the boundless formation of the 3 realms increased their power. They could attack together since he did not believe that 3 great emperors could not bring down a simple brat. The 3 prepared to attack, but the protagonist only smiled, saying that they were too weak. He dodged all the attacks and said that he had given them a chance to run away, but apparently they preferred death, so now it was his turn to attack. They realized that things were going too far and the leader shouted for everyone to retreat immediately. But the protagonist managed to eliminate one of them with ease and appeared behind the other before he could even form a sentence, telling the young man not to worry because soon they would be together again. After he eliminated 2 of the 3, Zhenren tried to flee, thinking that the boy was too strong and that he needed to escape. Yang thought that the old bastard was very quick to try to escape, but that would not help. He activated the sword technique of the 9 tribulations of heaven, heavenly slash. Genren used the soul dispersion talisman and was cut in half. Ying said that she had detected a soul escaping and asked her master if she should eliminate it, but Yang said there was no need because he wanted to play a little with that guy's soul. Genren kept trying to escape with only his soul, saying that one day he would return and take revenge on those idiots. The protagonist returned inside and everyone thanked him again. Qingyao asked which sect those people belonged to. The protagonist said that he heard them mention that they were from Feng Yun, but they had all already been eliminated. The sect master became worried, asking what they should do now, but the protagonist did not understand what there was to worry about, asking if that sect had any experts at the supreme stage. The counselor said that the Feng Yun sect was at the Great Emperor stage, but the Yunyin sect, which supported them, had several experts at the supreme stage. The protagonist said that Feng Yun had a great emperor and that the sect behind them had experts at the supreme stage, while they only had cultivators at the fusion stage. The sect master became a little embarrassed, saying that at least they still had the ancestral master. However, the counselor told the sect master that after the Lord's wedding, he would need to spend most of his time in the capital to accompany the empress. He became worried by that news, but the protagonist asked them to remain calm and immediately convene a meeting, because the focus now needed to be the wedding preparations. Meanwhile, everyone outside was saying that the ancestral master had returned, and that the great empress had come chasing after him, which made everyone extremely envious. But suddenly, the protagonist appeared in the middle of everyone, and the people were impressed, asking if he really was the ancestral master because he looked very young. Some people said that he looked very familiar, until they realized that he was Wang Yang, who lived behind the mountains. But as soon as he touched the ground, a crushing aura took over the entire place, leaving everyone in shock. The protagonist announced that in 5 days he would marry the empress of the great Shang dynasty. Because of that, he hoped everyone there would work hard during those days and help the imperial counselor prepare the sect. Some people became worried, asking if the protagonist was trying to recruit them for manual labor because the monthly assessment was approaching, and that was very unfair. On the other hand, most of them told the ancestral master that they would do their utmost to organize a grand wedding for him and the empress. Yang emphasized that right after his wedding, all inner and outer disciples would receive 3 marrow cleansing pills and 3 qi harmonization pills. All elders would receive 3 spirit condensation pills, and he would personally mentor the most talented ones selected by the sect. The sect master thanked the ancestral master for his generosity with the pills and his guidance. From that moment on, he would be the Grand Master of the spiritual sword sect. He asked all the members what they were waiting for, because they needed to hurry and thank the Grand Master. They bowed and thanked him for his kindness, and the sect master celebrated because now they could make the sect strong again. Yang asked Ying if she could provide all those rewards. She said yes, because there was no problem at all. Meanwhile, somewhere else, an elder said that he would rebuild Genren's body. However, his cultivation level might not return. Genren emphasized that the master of the spiritual sword sect had humiliated all of them and had even brutally eliminated the 5th and 7th brothers. Because of that, he promised that he would never rest until he achieved his revenge. But the old man made it clear that Genren had not been able to defeat the protagonist with the boundless formation of the 3 realms, so the cultivation level he had was probably above the supreme stage. But Genren became irritated, asking if they were really going to swallow that humiliation and remain silent. The elder emphasized that he could not allow that person to continue living, so he had to visit the Yu sect and ask them to destroy that place. Genren thanked his master for avenging the 5th and 7th brothers. Meanwhile, in the protagonist sect, everyone was working hard to make the place as perfect as possible. The counselor went to the sect master, saying that this was the dowry list she had prepared, and asked him to take a look. As soon as he began reading, he saw that the list included the golden brocade robe, the heavenly fire-glazed furnace, a nirvana phoenix feather, and the deep sea blood coral. This made him a little frightened because all those gifts were extremely precious, so perhaps they would not be able to prepare them. The counselor asked him not to worry so much because the Lord and the Empress were in love, so those wedding gifts were only a formality. Yang entered and questioned how his wedding with the Empress could be treated so lightly, because even if the spiritual sword sect was casual, they could not disrespect the great Shang dynasty. The counselor apologized to her lord for her presumption, because she should not have made decisions for the spiritual sword sect. Yang emphasized that the wedding gifts had already been prepared and that he certainly would not disappoint his future wife. As soon as the counselor saw the list, she was impressed, because it included the divine lightning sword, the 7-colored radiant robe, a mystic ice divine feather fan, the Nine Heavens Thunder Pearl, a Phoenix Tear Dawn Jade, among other things. She emphasized that the Lord was being extremely generous with the Empress. The sect master was so impressed that he thought he had never even heard of half of those treasures, and wondered when the spiritual sword sect had become so wealthy. Ying asked her master how he was doing, asking if the wedding gifts she had prepared were acceptable. The protagonist said yes, and emphasized that he needed to thank her this time because she had been a great help. Ying was happy with the praise and emphasized that those wedding gifts were only the appetizer, and tomorrow would bring the main course, because he only needed to wait and see the system's grand gift. 3 days later, some people were worried, saying that the great Shang dynasty was very far away, so how could they get there? The counselor asked the protagonist why the wedding procession had not arrived yet. He asked her to just be patient because they had just arrived. Ying asked if that wedding procession was large enough and impressive enough. The protagonist said that it was an entire fleet of dragons and that she had done a great job. The counselor could not understand how there could be so many Imperial Six Dragons carriages. Yang simply told her that the auspicious hour had just arrived and that they needed to leave. Meanwhile, the Empress was ready and a little worried because the Lord had not arrived yet. As soon as she heard a noise, she quickly stood up, asking if the Lord had arrived and if he was there to receive his bride. The woman taking care of her dress told her to be a little more careful because she could not lift the veil yet. As soon as the two met, the protagonist looked at her and thought that he had never imagined that in this life he would marry a beauty like her, and that he had definitely made the right choice by going there. He held her hand and told his bride that the auspicious hour had arrived, so he wanted to know if she was willing to walk hand in hand with him through life. Without thinking twice, she said yes. Yang removed her veil and she simply looked at her husband. The protagonist, on the other hand, was even more impressed when he saw how beautiful his woman was. The ceremony continued as they walked, and everyone wished that the bond between His Majesty and Her Highness would remain eternal, and that His Majesty and Her Highness would share endless love. As soon as they arrived outside, she looked at the carriage above. The protagonist picked her up in his arms and said that now they only needed to enter the carriage, so she did not need to be so embarrassed, because it was not as if it were a bridal chamber. She became embarrassed, saying that her husband had just married her and was already teasing her. But before they could leave, something happened. Everyone was surprised, asking what that was. The Empress asked if it could be the Xuanyue dynasty. The protagonist, already out of patience, asked his wife not to worry because he would solve this soon and come back to enjoy himself with her. The left minister and the right minister were together, but the left minister took a deep breath, thinking that he could not go against the emperor's wishes. And now it was too late. There was no turning back. 3 of the 4 generals were trying to break the formation, however. It was more resistant than before. The protagonist went to them, and Wen Yuan tried to speak politely with the protagonist, but irritated, he asked Wen Yuan to stop that, because he did not need that false courtesy, since he had the audacity to go back on his word and return to cause trouble. Wen Yuan tried to explain that orders were absolute, so if he handed over the Empress, they were willing to offer any compensation. Yang asked what kind of compensation that would be, because today was his wedding day with the Empress, and he had not been planning a bloodbath. But since the trash of the Xuanyue dynasty had come back to pressure them, none of them would leave that place alive. He took out Divine Light, the Ning sword. Wen Yuan asked Yuexin if she could deal with that first, and she agreed. He asked the 3 generals to help him with the formation. He began the formation with the flying azure dragon, the roaring white tiger, the dancing vermilion bird, and the guarding black tortoise. The power of the 4 divine beasts needed to answer his call, and with that, the formation was activated. The protagonist said that he had managed to bring out the flying azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise. But all of that to him was just a simple snake, a cat, a parakeet, and a tortoise. So they could witness him break that ridiculous formation. He asked if they really thought those little pets could intimidate anyone, because he would destroy the pathetic formation they had just created. He thought that Wen Yuan was controlling that formation, so if he dealt with that old man first, the formation would be finished. Wen Yuan saw the sword strike and became worried because it was too strong, and shouted for everyone to help him. Their attacks collided, causing a massive explosion and a shockwave. Wen Yuan felt a serious wound in his body, thinking that this was a dominant sword technique, and that if not for the protective formation, he definitely would have lost his life in that attack. On the other hand, the protagonist was becoming more and more irritated, because that formation was being a huge nuisance. That heaven-devastating slash should have been enough to defeat that trash. Lin Lang began losing patience and asked the counselor to bring her Phoenix Feather Crimson Heaven sword because she would help her husband break that formation. The counselor told the Empress that she could not go because that 4-beast formation had been created by the Xuantian Holy Lands and was extremely mysterious. Without supreme cultivation, it could only be broken from within. The Empress remained restless, asking if they were just going to watch the Lord be bullied by those people from the Xuanyue dynasty. The counselor asked her to calm down a little because the Lord's cultivation and foundation were unfathomable, and he would find a way to break that formation. Yang was still analyzing it and realized that Wen Yuan's wounds had healed quickly, which meant that formation had some use, so perhaps he needed to go all out. He activated his Sword of the Nine Tribulations of Heaven technique, Reincarnation Tribulation. He attacked again, but the attack was not that effective. The left prime minister asked the protagonist not to be so arrogant and tried to attack him, but he also managed to defend easily, resulting in another draw between the two. He thought that apparently the only way to win was to find a way to break that formation. Otherwise, they would keep fighting there forever. Ying told him not to worry because she had already found a way to break that formation. They tried to attack again, but the protagonist dodged and asked the system to let him see the method she had prepared to break that formation. Ying said that the system had detected his strong desire to break that formation. So here was a special reward called the Eye of Heavenly Perception. She began delivering the reward. As soon as the protagonist opened his eyes, he thought he had imagined it would be Sun Wukong's fiery golden eyes, but it was the heavenly eye, like Yang Jian's power. But at least now he could see some weak points in that formation. After analyzing it for a few seconds, he finally managed to find them and attacked again with everything he had, dealing damage to all of them. Yungqi began losing his cultivation and asked what that trash had done to make his cultivation decrease. Suddenly, the protagonist appeared behind him and thanked him for thinking of him, even at the moment of his death. He eliminated Yunqi and right after that, the other two generals with only one strike each. Wen Yuan, also wounded and with his cultivation dropping, asked if this was the protagonist's true power because it was terrifying. Yang prepared to deliver the final blow, saying that now only one remained, but Juexin stepped in front, blocking the attack and leaving the protagonist surprised. She emphasized that she would not allow him to kill the left minister. He was impressed by the right minister because apparently she had some skill, since she had managed to block his attack without much effort. He asked the system what her level really was. Ying said that he had just obtained the Heavenly Eye so he could use it to check anyone's cultivation. He tried using this new ability but ended up seeing something else and realized that it really was pink, because that contrast was a little too much. Ying became angry with him, saying that he had activated the wrong mode because that was the X-ray function of the Heavenly Eye. Juexin became embarrassed, calling the protagonist a pervert so he deserved death. He was surprised to see that she really could become embarrassed because he had thought she was just a doll. She tried to attack him, but the protagonist managed to defend and saw that she was in the 8th stage of the Great Emperor Realm, while he was only in the 4th stage of the Great Emperor Realm. The two continued fighting, but the protagonist resisted all her blows. He was impressed, thinking that her strength was truly formidable, so he needed to be careful. Wen Yuan warned that Yang should give up, because the right minister had the power to destroy nations, so he could not defeat her. Yang ordered him to be quiet, asking, since when a loser like him had the right to address someone, and landed another attack, making him shut up. Juexin took advantage of that opening to try to attack, but the protagonist dodged all her attacks. While evading her strikes, he analyzed her movements and saw that her body was like a feather. Ying noticed that he was getting a little distracted and shouted for him to be careful of that woman's spear. He laughed and thanked her for the warning because he had been focused on something else and had ended up getting a little distracted. He said that fighting an empress at the 8th stage really was complicated, but that made the battle more and more interesting. Ying also became excited and told the host that she had a secret technique that could take him to the next realm, but he refused, saying that it would not be fun to cheat and win so easily, so he would keep playing with her for a little longer for now. He asked his opponent if she really liked crushing everyone in her path, but then he remembered something and asked the system if he had managed to accumulate a lot of merit points and whether he could use them now. Ying said that she had already detected that he wanted to convert his merit points. Ying issued the reward of the divine level cultivation manual called the Sacred Virtue Record. The protagonist was happy to see that those merit points would finally have some use. He asked the system to begin cultivating quickly, and Ying congratulated him for cultivating the divine level cultivation manual, Sacred Virtue Record. The merit Dharma body reached level 9, Emperor. The protagonist emphasized that, with his cultivation base at level 4 of the Great Emperor Realm, but with his level 9 Emperor Merit Dharma body, his strength was now nothing less than supreme. Because of that, it was time to have a little fun with Juexin. She became confused and at the same time surprised, asking how the protagonist had become even stronger. Yang asked her to test it for herself and find out how he had improved. Irritated, she charged forward, saying that he had been asking for death for quite some time. But the protagonist blocked all of her attacks, saying that her light was too weak. So how could she compare it to the radiance of the sun and moon? He activated his 9 heavenly tribulations sword ability, Solar Eclipse Strike. With a simple movement, he managed to send her weapon flying far away and quickly moved over there to pick it up. Ying was impressed to see that the spear was actually divine level, but it was damaged, so it could only release immortal level power. The treasure levels are mortal, rare, spiritual, immortal, emperor, divine, and supreme heavenly Tao treasure. Juexin began shouting at the protagonist, telling him to return her spear, but he explained that good children should not play with dangerous toys, so he would keep that spear for her. Juexin became even angrier and started acting like a child, ordering him to return her weapon immediately. This made the protagonist wonder if her mind was being controlled, because she had suddenly started acting like a complete child out of nowhere. However, he decided to leave that for another time, because first he needed to subdue her, since he had something more important to do. With a quick strike, he managed to defeat her. Ying was surprised to see that the protagonist truly had no mercy for beauties. Yang asked what the system was talking about because that girl was at level 8 of the Great Emperor realm, so they could not keep playing around with sarcasm, and he asked for help figuring out how to tie her up. Ying congratulated him for defeating the ancient spiritual puppet. Because of that, he obtained the immortal binding rope and a divine-level cultivation manual. The protagonist realized that the immortal binding rope was very useful, however. He did not know why that cultivation manual was so mysterious. Ying explained that, as a true system, she always provided him with the best, so it would definitely be useful in the future. The manual was for repairing inflatable dolls. The protagonist asked if that manual could pass YouTube's censorship level. Ying changed the title, saying that it was only a small detail. Now the book was called The Heavenly Pivot Spiritual Puppet Technique. Yang felt a little more at ease with the rules because now the name sounded far too academic. The protagonist prepared to take his new prisoner away, but Wen Yuan asked him to wait, saying that Lady Juexin was a pillar of the Xuanyue dynasty, so he sincerely asked him not to take her away because he was willing to die in her place. However, the protagonist began to look down on him, asking why he would make that exchange, since Wen Yuan only had one pathetic life, but she could be useful. He asked him to go back and deliver a message to Emperor Xuanyue, and asked him to thank him for that wonderful wedding gift on his great day. And if he dared provoke him again, then the Xuanyue dynasty would be wiped off the map as if it had never existed, along with everyone inside it. Yang released even more of his power, ordering him to go back and tell that bastard emperor that he would personally destroy that dynasty soon. Wen Yuan only lowered his head, saying that he would deliver the message. The protagonist returned, and his new wife asked him if he had been injured during the battle because she had been very worried. The counselor asked the Empress not to worry since the protagonist had just humiliated the enemy forces and was perfectly fine. Yang threw Juexin onto the ground like a sack of potatoes. Qingyao asked her master who that was. He explained that she was the Grand Chancellor of the Xuanyue dynasty, but now she was only a prisoner. Juexin kept insulting the protagonist, ordering him to release her immediately, but he put something in her mouth to make her stop talking. He warned the Empress that he had suppressed that girl's cultivation to level 5 of the Immortal King realm. So they needed to find a place to lock her up, and he would deal with her later. Yang picked up Linlong, saying that they needed to leave quickly because they might end up being late for the ceremony. Completely enchanted, she gave herself to him, saying that they would do as he wished. While they were leaving, everyone was present to wish them a wonderful life. Meanwhile, in the protagonist's sect, some people were congratulating the master because they had never imagined that the Lingjin sect had a cultivator at the Great Emperor level. But the sect master said that it was not that impressive, because the Taigu Pavilion also had a great emperor protecting its foundation. Fang was impressed because the pavilion, which normally always ignored them, had sent someone to the banquet. The other person beside him said that not only them, but even the Biluo Palace, the Chonghua sect, and the Juhua sect had sent representatives. Because of that, it seemed that the Lingjian sect was about to rise, and they would no longer be just a third-level sect in the Eastern continent. Now, with the protagonist's abilities, they could believe they would reach the status of a first-level sect. The sect master became irritated with them and asked what the two of them were talking about, ordering them to go inside quickly and greet the guests because he was overwhelmed with all of that. Meanwhile, inside, one of the young masters who had been sent was sitting with several other people. The others commented that the Lingjian sect really was blessed because they had even managed to get the empress of the great Shang dynasty to marry one of them. And maybe that so-called Grand Master they kept talking about had some kind of special charm with women. The young master began looking down on the protagonist, saying that he bet the sect's Grand Master was just a pretty boy living off a rich woman. That so-called empress was probably an ugly witch. The people around him began laughing, but Zixuan was furious to see that useless man dare insult his entire sect, but before he could do anything, Changfeng stepped in front of him and asked him to wait, because that was an expert at the Great Emperor level from the Golden Palace, and no matter what happened, he could not provoke him. Suddenly it was announced that the bride and groom had arrived, and the protagonist walked in with his new wife. As soon as the people looked at the empress, they were impressed by such beauty, saying that the Lingjun sect had been insanely lucky to obtain a woman like that. Qingyao also began getting angry, thinking that the Grand Master and the Empress were a perfect match, so those pigs should not dare question it. As soon as Lin Lang came a little closer, the people realized that she was, in fact, the Empress of the Great Shang dynasty. The young master of the Golden Palace went in front of the two of them, saying that he had never thought the Great Empress of Shang would be so beautiful, so he suggested that she abandon that handsome man and marry him. Lin Lang simply said that this was the day of her wedding with the protagonist and she did not want trouble, so if he knew what was best for him, he should simply leave. But the young master moved a little closer, saying that he loved roses with thorns just like her, and that if she accepted becoming his, he would help exterminate the Xuanyu dynasty, since his influence came from none other than the powerful Golden Palace. Because of that, she should accept young master Situ. He was a renowned noble in the Confucian world of the Eastern continent. His father had become a supreme cultivator long ago, and even had influence in the sacred land of Wenyuan. Yang touched his shoulder and emphasized that it did not matter whether his support came from the Golden Palace or the Bronze Palace. Today he would die there, and there was nothing any of those idiotic palaces could do. Situ continued acting arrogantly, saying that an insignificant sect like that dared to disrespect him, and it seemed they did not know the meaning of death. And if he was truly confident, then why did they not fight outside and whoever won would become her groom? The people around them became excited, because it had been a long time since they had casually seen something so thrilling, and this was becoming more and more interesting. The protagonist said that Idiot was merely a great emperor at level 3, so he could choose how he would humiliate that imbecile. He emphasized that if Situ was really so eager to die, then he would grant his wish. The two went outside. Situ took out his flute, saying that the people of Lingjun probably knew nothing about the inheritance of a true powerhouse. That moonlit jade flute in his hands was a divine-level artifact. The protagonist emphasized that he had not expected the Golden Palace to be so generous and thanked him for gifting him such a precious present. C2 asked if the protagonist was going blind because that was his own life artifact. Yang became more and more excited because if that was that idiot's life artifact, then as soon as he died, it meant that artifact would belong to him. Situ began playing the ancestral melody of the 5 miracles, Dragon Roar over the Sea. Everyone began going crazy from that sound. But Situ could not believe what he was seeing because, with the power increase of the moonlit jade flute, even a supreme-grade person would be affected. Yet the protagonist was completely calm. Yang asked him what tone he was playing and if he really wanted to be sent to the afterlife with that ridiculous music. He attacked with the 9 Heavenly Tribulations sword, Meteoric Slash. The slash destroyed everything in front of it, eliminating Situ with a single move. The people watching had also been injured. As soon as they looked, they questioned whether the young master had really been knocked down with a single blow, because he was the son of the sect master of the Golden Palace. Yang emphasized that if anyone else dared to cause trouble there, they would all regret ever being born. He held Situ by the hair while warning the others, because if anyone tried to stir things up, they would have the same fate as that bastard. The others were completely stunned, thinking that the protagonist had completely lost his mind, because that was the young master of the Golden Palace. They thought they had come there to eat for free, but things had ended up getting out of control. The sect master asked everyone to remain calm because that was nothing serious. The wedding would continue so they could keep drinking and eating. But the truth was that he was a little worried because, out of everyone Situ could have messed with, he had provoked the Grand Ancestral Master. After that mess, Lingzhan would certainly have a feud with the Golden Palace. They returned to the hall to begin the ceremony. The protagonist looked at his bride and thought that he had never imagined that after transmigrating he would end up marrying a beautiful wife like her. Because of that, he promised himself that he would never disappoint his new empress in this life. Qingyao said that the first bow was to heaven and earth. Before she could announce the second bow, she realized that neither the protagonist's parents nor the empress's parents were there, because things were not supposed to happen that way. She decided to simply continue, saying that the second and third bows were for the couple, and now they would go to the bridal chamber. The sect master, along with Changfeng and Fang, began laughing, and Qingyao became embarrassed, asking what was so funny and why they were not doing things properly. Yang took Lin Lang's hand, saying that now they could go to the bridal chamber. They went to the room, and the protagonist sat beside her. But Lin Lang became a little embarrassed, telling her husband that she already knew what to do on the wedding night because the Grand Counselor had already given her the instructions. Yang thought that woman had even thought of that, and apparently, she really was the pillar of the Shang dynasty. Lin Lang threw herself onto the bed and asked what Yang was waiting for. He tore her clothes, saying that he could no longer hold himself back. Ying thought that things were getting far too intense. He closed the curtains, and the system became angry, saying that he should not block her view because the good part was starting now. The protagonist threw something at her, saying that wedding matters were not for children and that she needed to leave immediately. Ying kept complaining, asking what the protagonist meant by saying it was not for children, because she was only checking whether the mission was complete. During the night, Chang Feng was trying to peek. He found the sect master and asked what he was doing there. The sect master told him to be quiet and explained that a great emperor consummating his marriage was an event that happened once every 10,000 years. If they could obtain some information from it, it could help them surpass their own cultivation. Chang Feng was happy to hear that and said the master truly was a visionary person. But Qing Yao appeared with her little tool for petting the curious, asking if this was really where the two of them had said they were going to cultivate, because it looked like they were only trying to peek at someone's wedding night. They tried to make up an excuse, saying that it was not exactly what she was thinking, so they needed to talk to resolve the situation. But Qing Yao threw the two of them far away, telling them to leave immediately. She looked at the bridal chamber and thought that if only she were the woman lying on that bed, it would be better. Meanwhile, inside, the Empress was telling her beloved that she felt her cultivation was about to explode. Since she had the rare phoenix body, a great spiritual phoenix energy took over the entire place, and Qing Yao was shocked, asking if that was the power of the great Empress's wedding night. Suddenly, she felt something else and questioned what that was now. A dragon appeared beside the phoenix because that was Yang's power on the wedding night. As soon as the two finished, the Empress told the protagonist that she had never imagined that both of their cultivation realms would break through. Yang said that it was all thanks to her, because without the exchange of energy during that cultivation, it would not have been so easy to break through. Ying became angry because clearly she had done most of the work and no one thanked such a loyal system like her. The next day, the sect master asked who the fool was who had dared to ring the sect's soul bell, asking if he did not know what the 9 chimes of the bell meant. He went into the hall and greeted the Grand Master and the Empress, apologizing and saying that it was all the fault of his weak teaching, because he had failed to prevent some clueless disciples from ringing the bell 9 times and disturbing their rest. Yang said that he did not need to punish anyone. Besides, he also did not need to blame himself, because it was the protagonist himself who had rung the bell. The sect master was surprised, because he had thought some novice disciple had gone mad. But still confused, he thought that the 9 chimes of the bell meant survival or destruction within that sect, so what was Yang planning? The protagonist explained that on that day, he had used the bell to summon the entire sect. First, he would like to thank everyone for the support they had given to his wedding, and he had already prepared the promised rewards. The sect master looked back and was impressed, telling the ancestral master that he was very generous, because they had only been doing their own duty. However, he was drooling at the sight of the body-cleansing pills, the harmonization pills, and even the condensed focus pills that he desperately needed to evolve. Now, the Lingjin sect was truly about to prosper. The protagonist continued speaking, saying that regarding security, he planned to personally train some of the more promising disciples to strengthen the sect's power. But the sect master told the protagonist that he could leave that to him, because no one knew the talents of that place better than he did. Lin Lang informed the protagonist that her realm had already reached the intermediate stage of the Immortal King realm, so she would like to know if he would mind giving her some guidance again. Yang said that as soon as they returned to the Yuqing Pavilion that night, he would give her special training and guide her step by step until she broke through again. Lin Lang was impressed and even a little embarrassed after hearing all of that. She shouted, saying that he was being far too bold and that this was not the proper place for that kind of comment. Qing Yao, who was also present, became embarrassed, wondering if that was something she should be hearing. Ying also thought that her host was shameless, because apparently he could not even wait to do that behind closed doors. A short time later, the sect master returned and told the protagonist that he had already brought all the promising disciples. But as soon as he looked ahead and saw that he had brought several disciples, Yang asked Wuya if he had not told him to find the promising disciples, so why had he brought all the peak elders? Wuya explained to the protagonist that the sect always valued talent above all else. If they were not skilled, they would not have reached the rank of elder. The protagonist used his ability to see their talent levels, which were mortal, transcendent, spiritual genius, immortal essence, sacred body, and innate Tao body. As soon as he analyzed everyone's levels and talents, he thought that Wuya really had not been lying because for the sect to have someone like Qingyao with a sacred body was practically a miracle. He said that he had few strong cards to use and the gap between cultivation realms was far too large, so forming a solid team would be difficult. Lin Lang asked him not to be discouraged because when she returned, she would issue an imperial decree to recruit talented disciples for Lingjin's training. This made the protagonist excited, saying that the great Shang dynasty had many citizens, and there was a high chance that there would be a chosen one, or someone destined for cultivation. Ying appeared, saying that the host had shown a desire to find a chosen one, and the task reward was a gift package of cultivation techniques. He looked at all the books and asked the system what exactly that was. She apologized, saying that it was only a system error, but that she had already fixed everything. He said that the origin of return technique could replace the sect's foundation method, so Zixuan and all his fellow disciples should focus on mastering it. And for the elders, they should cultivate the 9 profound layers abilities and focus on breaking through the great ascension to achieve immortality soon. Zixuan thanked the Grand Ancestral Master, saying that he would train as much as possible and live up to his expectations. Wuya, Fang, and Chang Feng were arguing to see who would learn that technique first. Qingyao asked them if they could not act with a little dignity because the Grand Master was watching. The protagonist threw a manual and she was surprised, asking if that was for her. Yang explained that if she could master the goddess immortal melody technique, her cultivation could rival that of a supreme. Ying told the protagonist that he had very good taste because that goddess immortal melody technique was perfect for a sacred body or a mystical body like hers. Qingyao fell to her knees and began thanking him after hearing that she would rival a supreme. This made her think that the Grand Ancestral Master truly cared about her, because he had even gifted her a supreme-level technique. The Empress looked at her husband and thought that perhaps this meant she was officially part of the Lingjun sect. Yang handed her the manual, but that one was different, and it was called a sutra. She asked what it was. The protagonist said that everyone had received a gift, so how could he forget his beloved? He emphasized that the book, called the Kama Sutra, had been created by an ancient saint, and he thought it suited the two of them perfectly. Lin Lang became excited and curious, saying that she would take a look at what was so special about that technique. But as soon as she looked, she was surprised. She looked at her husband and said that the book was truly profound, so he should save that night to test its mysteries with her. He laughed, saying that if she asked so sweetly, then he could not refuse. She hugged him, celebrating that she had also received a gift. Meanwhile, in the Golden Palace, a woman was calling for Situ Xiaocheng. A subordinate went to Minghui, saying that the sect master had ordered that no one disturb him, no matter what happened. But she kept shouting, saying that Xiaocheng was filthy because his son had been eliminated, and yet he could still sit there doing nothing. The subordinate remained worried, telling her not to shout because he knew she was suffering, but the master was suffering too. Besides, he was in the middle of a crucial breakthrough, and if he lost focus and suffered a backlash, the entire Golden Palace could collapse. Minghui remained completely out of control and emphasized that if the Golden Palace had no heart, then she herself would avenge her son. She left at high speed, thinking that if that heartless old ghost Xiaocheng would not act, then she would find someone who could help. Sometime later in the Lingjian sect, the people were worried because they had heard a noise and felt an extremely strong pressure. Inside, the protagonist was teaching Qingyao how to wield a sword. Suddenly, he heard a very loud noise coming from outside. Someone was insulting the entire sect and ordering someone to appear. The protagonist was surprised and asked whether the sect's protective array was under attack again. The Empress warned her husband that the visitor seemed extremely hostile, so she was worried. Yang asked her not to be afraid because he would go see which idiot had come to challenge them this time. Qingyao asked who was blind enough to cause trouble for the Lingjin sect. She asked the protagonist to let her go out and tear apart the mouth of that bastard causing trouble. The protagonist explained that the visitors meant nothing good, so she needed to stay there and take care of the Empress, and he would be back soon. Meanwhile, above the array, Minghui was irritated, saying that that man could not even deal with the formation of a small sect, so what use was he? The man explained that this small sect actually had the formation of a great sect, and it was very complicated because it looked nothing like a ninth-rate sect. The protagonist appeared before them, saying that if they did not possess the realm of supremacy, they did not even need to waste their efforts, because they would not be able to break through the barrier. The man stepped in front of Minghui, asking where that stinking brat had come from, and saying that if the protagonist was not careful, he would die along with that sect. Yang said that he had never changed his given name, much less his surname. He was the great elder of the Lingjian sect. Minghui became furious after hearing the protagonist's name and said that now he would pay with his life for her son's death. But the man asked her not to act so impulsively because he could deal with that bastard. The protagonist began laughing, saying that the woman was a nun and the man was a Taoist, while that useless guy's father was the sect master of the Golden Palace of Confucianism. He asked if that was a rigid Confucian who had kidnapped a messy Taoist nun, because her relationships were truly confusing, enough to make one's body and hair shiver. The man became furious, ordered Yang to shut up, and introduced himself, saying that he was Hermit Tianquan and that he would definitely cut him into 1,000 pieces. But the protagonist kept mocking him. Tianquan became furious and tried to attack him, but the protagonist defended himself with ease. Tianquan asked how that was possible because the protagonist had silently absorbed his sword moves, and perhaps that brat had already reached the realm of supremacy. Yang emphasized that he could understand that woman's feelings, but suggested that they end that matter immediately. Tianquan, worried, tried to convince Minghui to withdraw, but she told him to shut up and said that he had no heart because it was her son who had died there. Minghui gathered her courage again and said that today he would not only eliminate all of Lingjian, but also cripple that bitch Lin Lang and marry her to her son in a ghost wedding. This made the protagonist furious, and the system noticed that his killing intent had returned again. Yang took out his sword, saying that he used to think that cutting the grass by the roots in novels was unnecessary, but today was an exception. Tianquan was frightened and asked what exactly he wanted to do. Yang said that he would send the two of them to accompany Situ so the family would be reunited again. Ying said that she had detected the host's desire to help people reunite, immediately issuing a saint-grade cultivation technique called the Divine Transformation Art of the Three Souls. She said that there was a reward and asked if he was not going to check it, but Yang ignored the system, saying that he would eliminate those idle fools, starting with the nun. Tianquan tried to defend, but the attack was so strong that even using all his defense, he still suffered severe damage. Minghui became furious, saying that apparently he had made no progress all these years since he could not defeat a mere brat. Tianquan explained to her that to defeat that person, they would have to use combined swordsmanship. The two prepared to attack and charge towards the protagonist, but he thought that it was simply shameful because they even had a combined sword move like a pair of adulterous lovers. Ying asked the protagonist why he did not use the new cultivation technique to deal with them. Yang asked if the divine transformation art of the three souls was not just a chi technique that manifested the three pure ones. Ying explained that it was basically that, but since they were using combined swordsmanship, he could also use a 3 against 2. The protagonist began laughing, leaving the two of them surprised. Suddenly, two more Yangs appeared. Tianquan became worried, asking what kind of evil cultivation technique that was. Minghui told him that it had to be just an illusion, because only one was the real body, so there was nothing to fear. But the three protagonists began attacking simultaneously. Tianquan blocked one attack, but thought that the power of that sword move was extremely profound, so the protagonist really had to be in the realm of supremacy. Minghui could not even defend against the first attack. Tianquan realized that she was injured and tried to go help her. He managed to hold her before she began to fall. He realized that he had no chance of winning that battle, and told the protagonist that he truly was a magnanimous person, so he would like to offer his life to spare Minghui's. But she refused, asking him to be quiet because even if she became a ghost, she would never let that bastard go. But Yang apologized to the two of them, saying that unfortunately he was in a bad mood, so all of them needed to die. Tianquan, with no way out, said that now that he had heard that, even if it cost him his life, he would drag the protagonist down to hell with him. Ying asked Yang to be careful, but the protagonist sensed something, and apparently that little dog was planning to self-destruct. Tianquan threw himself onto Yang's body and told Minghui to run. She thought that she should have known better than to look for that useless man to support her. A great explosion occurred. Tianquan's soul tried to escape, saying that it would be better for him to go ask Xiaocheng for help. Minghui thought that, at the very least, that heartless man was in the realm of supremacy. But suddenly she received an attack to the head and questioned what kind of secret art that was. A powerful energy surrounded her, and the protagonist emphasized that he had already said that neither of them would escape today. He activated the Flying Willow Absolute Field. They entered what seemed like another dimension. She said that if she were eliminated by him, then the Buddhist sect would not let him escape, so he only needed to wait to go to hell. But Yang attacked her, saying that in any case he had already offended the scholars, the Confucians, and the Taoists, so there was no harm in adding one more sect. Ying praised him, saying that the protagonist truly was incredible, because he had challenged the 3 religions of Buddhism all by himself. Yang asked if all of that had also been part of her plan. The system said no, because how could that system plot against an elderly person like the protagonist? Besides, That system had always helped him efficiently. Yang held her affectionately and said that was very good, as long as it was true. Yang asked her to stop and go back because his wife and the others must be worried. Back inside his sect, the Empress ran over to him, asking if he was all right, because that scene just now had been terrifying. Qingyao thought that the Great Elder was truly incredible, because he had managed to defeat those invading enemies again without much difficulty. Yang said that the problem just now had been solved without much effort because it was nothing serious. Wuya asked who exactly those invaders were. Yang explained that it was Situ's mother who had caused trouble yesterday. She had brought a little dog named Tianquan, but he had not been very lucky. Wuya was surprised, asking if that really was Tianquan from the flowing water reflecting the moon sect and what they should do now. The protagonist asked what kind of sect that was. Wuya explained that the sect had 4 elegant cultivators with similar ideals. Its reputation was very well known in the Confucian world of the Eastern continent. But the protagonist said that from the description, it sounded like nothing more than an association of old people and was not threatening at all. Wuya was surprised again, thinking that the Great Elder's abilities were truly unfathomable. So he could assume that the remaining members of that sect would not dare cause trouble for the Lingjin sect. Yang asked them not to worry too much and to focus only on cultivating the secret manuals and mental arts he had provided to everyone. Wuya said that all of them needed to cultivate hard, but the Lingjin sect was not an important sect, and to begin with, its spiritual energy was pitifully scarce. Even if they cultivated hard every day, it would be difficult to advance. The protagonist agreed, saying that everything he said made some sense, so he suggested that everyone find an important sect and directly take its heavenly grotto and blessed land. Wuya falls into despair when he realizes that Yang is considering a war between sects and immediately tries to stop him, warning that a conflict of that scale would be disastrous and could even attract the intervention of the sacred lands. Yang agrees that a sect war would be far too troublesome and remarks that he hates getting involved with karma since situations like that can easily spiral out of control, so he prefers to find another solution. At that moment, Ying appears confidently and tells the host that he can leave everything to her. In response to Yang's strong desire to develop the sect, the system rewards him with a purple mansion immortal stone. Yang wants to know what the treasure does, and Ying explains that if the stone is placed deep within the sect's spiritual vein, it will raise the quality of that vein and make the spiritual energy it produces much denser. Upon seeing the object, Wuya is astonished and asks what kind of treasure it is. Yang then calmly explains that it is indeed a purple mansion immortal stone, capable of improving the quality of the Lingjin sect's spiritual vein. Fang is completely shocked when he recognizes the item and emphasizes that it is a legendary treasure, something that even some great sects with centuries of heritage do not possess. Soon afterward, upon realizing Yang's intention, Fang panics and demands to know what he is planning to do. Without hesitation, Yang acts and uses the stone, throwing it directly into the sect's spiritual vein. Purple energy explodes and spreads throughout the entire area, causing an immediate transformation in the surroundings. Lin Lang is impressed and praises Yang when she feels that the spiritual energy around them has truly skyrocketed. Qingyao, watching everything, is stunned by the power of the sect's Grand Master and thinks that he has even managed to strengthen their spiritual vein. Wuya then sets his admiration aside and orders everyone to hurry and meditate, while Fang also encourages those present to seize this rare opportunity to try to break through their limits. The disciples obey immediately and begin cultivating amid the extremely dense spiritual energy. The results appear quickly. Some manage to reach foundation establishment, while another even succeeds in forming a golden core. Amid this scene, Lin Lang affectionately approaches Yang and asks why he himself is not taking advantage of that energy to cultivate. Yang replies with a sideways smile that meditation is far too slow and that dual cultivation is much faster. Lin Lang becomes embarrassed and irritated at the same time, scolding him for the idea and saying that it is not even nighttime yet for him to be thinking about that kind of thing. Upon seeing the scene, Qingyao grows shy and thinks that if it were with her, she would not mind practicing dual cultivation with the sect's Grand Master either. The next day, Yang wakes up remembering that the previous night's session had been far too intense and that he had barely managed to get up that morning. Yang finds Lin Lang already awake and getting ready early. When he asks why, she reminds him that this is the day they are returning to her kingdom. The protagonist jokes that he would never forget the day of visiting his wife's family, but Lin Lang explains that she has recently conquered 6 kingdoms and that the Great Shang dynasty has not yet been completely stabilized. Because of that, she needs to return to supervise the situation and deal with the huge backlog of court affairs. Yang calmly agrees and leaves all those responsibilities in the hands of his empress wife. Shortly afterward, he opens the system to check his current status and discovers that although he remains at the 6th level of the Great Emperor realm, his merit Dharma body has fallen to the 2nd level of the Emperor grade. Unable to understand why his power has decreased so much, Yang questions Ying, who explains that the various recent battles have consumed part of his merit points. To restore or raise the level of the merit Dharma body again, he will need to accumulate more merit. Yang complains when he discovers that this ability also has a wear and tear system, considering such a mechanism extremely inconvenient. Ying, however, assures him that the problem will disappear once the merit Dharma body reaches the Supreme Emperor realm. Faced with this, the protagonist concludes that he will have to make a major impact in the Great Shang dynasty and accomplish important deeds in order to quickly gather a new amount of merit points. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Chu Tianchen appears before the patriarch of his clan and greets him respectfully, although inwardly he wonders suspiciously what those old men are planning. The patriarch immediately confronts him over the failure of the previous invasion of the Great Shang dynasty, asking why he had not personally supervised the battlefield and had allowed someone else to take Ye Linlang's purity. Chu Tianchen takes full responsibility and asks to be punished, but the patriarch replies that he has no authority to punish him since he is not his third uncle. He then reveals that even though they failed to obtain Linlang's virginity, they still need to capture her and use her as an elixir catalyst for cultivation. Worried, Chu Tianchen warns that the Great Shang dynasty now has powerful allies, and that capturing Linlang will not be easy. The patriarch, however, decides to personally lead the next attack, refusing to believe that an unknown Lingzhen sect can truly protect the entire dynasty. Chu Tianchen then flatters him, claiming that with his participation, they will crush both the Great Shang dynasty and the Lingzhen sect with ease. Having no patience for further discussion, the patriarch orders him to immediately gather the troops and prepare the expedition. Chu Tianchen obeys, but as he walks away, he mentally curses the old man for his obsession with women. According to him, the patriarch's plans have already led to the downfall of 2 prime ministers and 4 great generals of the kingdom. Now, on top of everything else, they still expect him to personally lead the front lines. Realizing that he has no way to escape the mission, Chu Tianchen concludes that he will need to seek the help of a certain person before the war begins. When Yang and Linlang return for the homecoming visit, the news spreads quickly and attracts the attention of many people. While some curious onlookers ask why there is so much commotion, others soon explain that the Empress and the national consort have returned for the official visit. Thus, a huge crowd gathers to welcome them, and the couple appears in public amid the cheers of the people. The reception is warm, with everyone praising the Empress and the national consort. At that moment, the system recognizes that Yang has earned the admiration of the masses and grants him a significant amount of merit points. Ying, however, is confused by the way mortals view cultivation and finds it strange that someone in the Emperor realm, with a lifespan of hundreds of thousands of years, is treated as though they were only 1,000 years old. Yang then calmly explains that ordinary people spend their entire lives simply trying to survive and therefore have no idea about the secrets of the cultivation world. After the public reception, the two head to the court. As soon as Linlang enters the palace, the officials come to greet her and report that many important matters await her decision. Among them, they emphasize that a country cannot go even a single day without its ruler, and that the situation at the borders requires urgent attention. Amid renewed cries of greeting, Linlang orders everyone to rise and immediately resumes control of the administration. During the court session, she adopts a firm attitude and begins resolving the pending matters quickly. One of the most urgent issues is the flooding in the southern province, which requires immediate relief and can tolerate no further delays. The officials readily accept the orders and prepare to carry them out. Meanwhile, Yang follows everything beside her, but inwardly he is bored and finds the work unbearable, merely waiting for the moment when the audience ends. When Linlang finally concludes the session and dismisses the officials, Yang is genuinely relieved. To him, the end of court is almost a reason to celebrate. Soon afterward, Ying wants to know where he intends to go next. Yang explains that he has arranged something with the national advisor and that he will head to the heavenly prison to visit Jue Xin, the minister of the right who was captured earlier. In his thoughts, he makes his true objective clear. If he can recruit Jue Xin, who is a powerhouse of the Emperor realm, he will gain an extremely valuable ally. When he meets the advisor, she greets him respectfully, and Yang simply tells her to rise, dispensing with formalities. The two then head toward the heavenly prison. When they arrive, the advisor remarks that the prison is not very far from the palace, which already shows how important that place is to imperial control. As soon as they enter the corridors, the oppressive atmosphere of the prison becomes evident. Some prisoners notice their approach and immediately begin reacting. One of them senses the presence of a woman before even seeing her, while another desperately shouts that he was framed and begs to be released. The advisor then explains that the heavenly prison holds many dangerous criminals and that if anything happens inside, only Her Majesty will have the ability to keep everything under control. Ying, despite trying to act brave, is clearly frightened by the dark and oppressive place. Yang, on the other hand, remains completely calm and regards those mortal prisoners as an insignificant threat, unable to understand why anyone would be afraid of them. Even so, the atmosphere remains hostile, and one of the inmates even crudely provokes Yang, calling him a pretty boy and insinuating that he wants to get close to him. But the protagonist does not like that. Refusing to let a prisoner continue acting tough in front of him, the protagonist reacts immediately and draws a scream of pain from the man, making it clear that no one inside will get away with that kind of provocation. Afterward, the advisor leads him to Cell A, one of the heavenly prison, and explains that this is where Jue Xin is being held. Yang then realizes that this is the cell where she was imprisoned, and the advisor adds that if he had not used a treasure to suppress her cultivation, an ordinary prison like that would have had no chance of containing her. This makes it even clearer just how powerful Jue Xin truly is. Before Yang enters, the advisor warns him with concern, reminding him that Jue Xin is extremely powerful and asking him to be careful. Even so, the protagonist remains confident, states that he will handle the situation alone, and dismisses the advisor, preferring to deal with the prisoner personally. Upon entering, Yang finds Jue Xin tied up and immobilized. He then begins examining her in an almost methodical manner, checking whether she is breathing, whether her body is still warm, and whether her pulse remains normal. Jue Xin reacts furiously when she realizes what he is doing and begins insulting him, demanding that he release her and threatening to kill him once she regains her freedom. Despite her hostility, Yang observes that this spiritual puppet named Jue Xin is a great beauty and concludes that it is a pity someone has corrupted her mind. At that moment, Ying appears excitedly and suggests that even with her current aggressive personality, Jue Xin can still be re-educated. Yang finds the idea interesting and begins seriously considering the possibility of turning her into a loyal ally. He then pulls out a renowned Saint grade technique called the Heavenly Soul Control Art and realizes that it is the proper method to take control of the situation. Upon examining the technique, Yang discovers that controlling a spiritual puppet requires a seal as a key. In order to reshape the spiritual puppet's mind, it is first necessary to destroy the original seal controlling her. With that in mind, he begins analyzing Jue Xin more carefully to locate where the seal is hidden. Yang concludes that the manipulator controlling her has been quite clever to hide the seal in a difficult-to-detect location. After locating its position, he approaches her and makes it clear that she will soon begin obeying his commands. Jue Xin is shocked when she understands his intention and tries to resist even more, but she's already completely at Yang's mercy. In the end, when he finally reaches the location of the seal and begins directly interfering with it, Jue Xin reacts involuntarily, letting out a muffled sound followed by a short moan. Thus, Yang begins the process of destroying the original control seal, the first step toward freeing Jue Xin from her previous manipulation and reshaping her mind to bring her over to his side. Elsewhere, Yin Minyoung immediately senses that someone has tampered with the seal she herself left behind and finds the situation intriguing. At that moment, she receives a visit from Zhuan Yue, who comes to the heavenly prison to mock her condition. Yin Minyoung responds sarcastically, completely distrusting him, and makes it clear that she will never believe the words of a treacherous emperor. In her view, if Zhuan Yue is still keeping her alive, it is only because of his obsession with the former spiritual puppet. Shortly afterward, Zhuan Yue subjects her to pain to force her to cooperate. When he sees that she can no longer continue resisting in the same way, he reveals that Jue Xin has been taken away and proposes a deal. If Yin Minyoung helps him kill the person responsible, he will grant her freedom. With no real choice, she bitterly agrees, while still insulting Chu Tianchen for his incompetence and commenting that he does not even come close to his father's cunning. Even so, she makes it clear that once she is free, she will still make Zhuan Yue pay for what he has done. At the same time, back in the cell, Yang realizes that he has gone too far in the process. Although he has managed to destroy the original seal, he discovers that he cannot simply install another ordinary seal there. Ying then suggests that there are several ways to control a spiritual puppet, and that he does not need to insist on the old method. Yang agrees, begins searching through other options, and eventually finds a seal that seems promising. Before applying it, he warns Jue Xin that the process might cause a bit of turbulence. When the new technique is activated, an enormous energy disturbance engulfs the area. The commotion is so intense that people outside become alarmed, and even Lin Lang, noticing the noise coming from the direction of the heavenly prison, suspects that something might have gone wrong. Yang also wonders whether the procedure has truly worked, but Ying thinks it is unlikely that such an intense effect would end in failure. In the end, the result appears. Jue Xin regains consciousness in confusion, unable to understand where she is or who Yang is. Shortly afterward, however, she begins addressing him as master, and Yang realizes, surprised and satisfied, that the new seal has truly worked. The system then confirms the success, informing him that the former spiritual puppet has recognized Yang as her master and, as a reward, grants him 3 Emperor-grade spiritual awakening pills, capable of awakening intelligence in pets or puppets while also raising their cultivation. Finding the reward useful, Yang decides to test the pill on Jue Xin immediately. The effect appears quickly and she advances from the 8th to the 9th level of the Emperor realm. With that, the protagonist is quite satisfied, because in addition to strengthening the puppet, he has also managed to make her recognize him as her master without needing lengthy training. Taking advantage of the change, he decides that Jue Xin will be called Wu Xuanji from then on. After that, Yang uses the technique to release the immortal binding rope restraining her. However, as soon as Xuanji is freed, something seems strange. Ying is already amused by the situation before Yang even understands what is happening. Free from her restraints, Xuanji approaches him far more intimately than expected, saying that she can finally stay close to her master. At that instant, the system reveals the true hidden detail of the seal he chose. It is a love seal, which causes the marked puppet to become excessively affectionate, clingy, and dependent, while also preventing the seal from being reapplied for another 100 years. Yang is completely shocked when he discovers this absurd setting and realizes too late that he has created his own problem. Xuanji, already under the seal's effects, begins acting increasingly needy and affectionate, asking her master for help and clinging to him. The protagonist panics and begins blaming the system for putting him in that situation, but Ying responds sarcastically, reminding him that he is the one who chose that seal. Thus, what should have been nothing more than recruiting a powerful ally ends up becoming yet another major problem for Yang, who is now trapped by the consequences of his own choice. However, Yang ends up being found by Lin Lang in an extremely compromising situation. The Empress is shocked and demands to know what he is doing, while the protagonist panics and tries to explain that everything is nothing more than a misunderstanding. Lin Lang assumes that he has felt neglected while she has been handling the kingdom's affairs and even admits that she can arrange for someone to serve him, but she cannot understand why he has gone looking for pleasure inside the prison of all places. Yang tries to clear up the misunderstanding, but the national advisor only makes matters worse by taking responsibility for failing to notice his supposed intentions, and commenting that if she had known, she would have taken the national consort to her own residence. Irritated, Yang asks her to stop making the situation worse while Xuanji also tries to calm him down. After much confusion, the protagonist finally explains that he went to the heavenly prison to turn Jue Xin into a new combat force for the great Shang dynasty, but a small accident occurred during the process. Upon realizing that Yang took a risk in order to strengthen the great Shang dynasty, Lin Lang acknowledges that she acted impulsively and is moved by her husband's supposed sacrifice. Lacking the energy to continue arguing, he simply accepts her interpretation. The advisor then examines Wu Xuanji and is impressed to discover that the former spiritual puppet is practically indistinguishable from a real person. Her only apparent flaws are her still limited intelligence and highly unstable emotions. Yang knows that the spiritual awakening pill has a cooldown period before it can be used again, but he remembers that he still has 2 white ghost stones and decides to test whether they can improve Xuanji's condition. When he tries to use one of them, an unexpected reaction strikes Xuanji, who becomes frightened and asks what is happening to her body. The puppet moves even closer to her master, putting Yang under pressure with her excessively needy behavior, although she soon apologizes. Before he can fully discover the result of the test, a powerful vibration sweeps through the palace. The advisor realizes that the dynasty's protective formation is under attack. Lin Lang laments that the great Shang dynasty has barely regained stability and is already facing 2 new powerful enemies. But Yang corrects her assessment after sensing 3 presences, all with cultivation equivalent to, or higher than, the upper levels of the Great Emperor realm. The Empress is alarmed to discover that 3 opponents of that level have appeared at once. Preparing for the confrontation, Yang hands Xuanji a Saint-grade spear. She accepts the weapon gratefully, while the protagonist orders the advisor to remain in the palace, since her cultivation is not high enough to participate in that battle. He then departs alongside Lin Lang and Xuanji to teach the invaders a lesson, receiving the advisor's wishes for victory and a triumphant return. Upon finding the enemies, Yang realizes that none of them are familiar to him and confronts them for attacking a dynasty that is now under his protection. Among the invaders are the patriarch at the peak of the Great Emperor realm, as well as Chu Tianchen and Yin Mainyang, both half a step away from the supreme realm. Chu Tianchen ignores Yang's authority and orders Ye Lin Lang to be handed over immediately, claiming that he might spare Yang's life if he obeys. The the protagonist recognizes the man connected to Emperor Zhuan Yue and mocks him for continuing to act like an imperial figure within the territory of the Great Shang dynasty. Yang also reminds him that he has already defeated his 2 ministers and 4 generals, asking whether it is now Chu Tianquan's turn to die. Furious at the provocation, Chu Tianquan tries to respond, but Yin Mainyang immediately becomes fascinated by Yang's appearance and dominant bearing. Inwardly, she considers the young man extremely attractive, until the jade pendant worn by Chu Tianquan causes her to feel intense pain. He reprimands her for flirting in the middle of the battlefield and orders her to kill Yang, threatening to punish her even more if she refuses. Intrigued, the protagonist asks the system how a simple pendant can control such a powerful expert. Ying explains that it probably works through a soul control technique, a fairly common method in the cultivation world. Yin Mainyang then seductively warns Yang that she is being forced to fight him and asks him to be gentle during the battle. Her attitude enrages Linlong, who calls her a shameless vixen and demands that she stay away from her husband. Yin Mainyang responds provocatively, promising to attack carefully so she will not cause any serious harm to the man who has caught her attention so strongly. The patriarch loses patience with the argument and orders everyone to stop shouting, capture the empress immediately, and take her back so that the old ancestor can turn her into a cultivation cauldron. Wasting no more time, the patriarch unleashes the black netherworld palm, forming a gigantic shadowy hand against his opponents. Zhuangji immediately identifies him as the greatest threat to her master and advances to stop him from approaching, directly confronting the patriarch's enormous attack and beginning the battle between the 3 invaders and the defenders of the great Shang dynasty. While Zhuangji fights the patriarch, Yin Mainyang takes advantage of the distraction to approach Yang and provoke him, making it clear that she will be his opponent. Before the protagonist can react, she releases several strips of cloth and flower petals around him. Yang tries to cut through them, but realizes that the material can withstand even his attacks, allowing Mainyang to capture him and drag him into an isolated space. Linlong shouts in concern when she sees her husband disappear, while Yang examines the petals and realizes that there is something strange about them. Upon arriving inside that place, he cannot immediately tell whether he is trapped within a formation or a separate dimension. Yin Mainyang is surprised by how calm he remains and continues provoking him, confessing that she finds him attractive and wants to turn him into an obedient puppet. Yang rejects the threat, declaring that no one across all the realms is capable of turning him into a puppet. Even so, he quickly begins searching for the core of the formation, because he needs to figure out how to escape. Mainyang explains that this is a Sumeru space prepared especially for him, and that, as its master, she can easily erase any existence trapped within it. The protagonist questions this supposed absolute authority and decides to test it. Wielding his sword, he uses the Heavenly Journey 9 Tribulation Sword and unleashes Fallen Heaven Fracture. Yin Mainyang responds with the illusory Cloud Silk Shield but is shocked when she realizes that Yang is not suffering from the suppressive effects of that space. According to her, even experts of the Supreme Realm have their cultivation restricted upon entering it. Yang replies that perhaps he is simply stronger than those ordinary Supreme Realm cultivators. Inwardly, he concludes that the Tao of Go has once again neutralized the enemy's influence. When he prepares to completely destroy the space, Ying warns him to be careful, explaining that the place is only a dimensional fragment. If it is completely shattered, everyone could end up lost in the infinite void. Upon learning of this risk, Yang finds the situation extremely inconvenient and regrets not taking the initiative to kill Yin Mainyang before she imprisoned him. Outside, Xuanji demands that the enemies release her master. The patriarch mocks her, claiming that Yang will only come out as a corpse, because Mainyang's Sumeru space is powerful enough to trap and kill even ordinary Supreme Realm experts. Furious, Zhuangji tells the old man to shut up and attacks with the Starry Sky Spear technique, unleashing the Flying Fire Meteor. The patriarch responds with black netherworld darkness and uses the unique form Shadow Palm to block the strike. During the clash, the patriarch realizes that something is wrong with Zhuangji. Although she is only a spiritual puppet, her cultivation has increased by 2 levels since the last time he saw her. Chu Tianquan is also surprised and comments that Jue Xin has managed to evolve beyond his expectations. Xuanji, however, immediately rejects that former name and declares that she is now called Xuanji, making it clear that she no longer recognizes her previous identity or those who once controlled her. Chu Tianquan orders old Ming to show Xuanji no mercy and teach her a proper lesson. The patriarch, however, becomes irritated at being treated like a subordinate and thinks that if the Grand Elder did not consider Chu Tianquan useful, he would already have slapped him several times for such insolence. Meanwhile, Linlong demands to know where Yin Mainyang has taken her husband and threatens not to spare Chu Tianquan if anything happens to him. The enemy confidently replies that Yang is already doomed, because no one has ever escaped Minyoung's Sumeru space alive. He then begins lusting after the Empress's beauty as well, saying that if not for the ancestors' orders, he would want to take her into his harem. Lin Lang reacts furiously and launches an attack against him, but Chu Tianchen blocks her advance with ease and mocks the difference between their cultivation levels. He claims that he will have to personally discipline her to control her temper before she ruins the ancestors' plans, even at a disadvantage. The Empress does not back down and assures him that Yang will escape that dimension and slaughter him like a wild dog, although inwardly she is desperate and only wishes for her husband to remain safe. Inside the Sumeru space, Yin Mine Yang reveals that there is something she is extremely curious about: how Yang managed to remove the control seal placed on Jue Xin. The protagonist corrects the name, referring to her as Wu Xuanji, and replies that destroying such an inferior restriction required no effort at all and was resolved in just an instant. Minyoung is incredulous because it took her an entire 100 years to turn Jue Xin into a spiritual puppet. Yang emphasizes that regardless of whether she believes him or not, the result is right before her eyes, since Xuanji is now absolutely loyal to him. Upon realizing his ability, Minyoung changes her attitude and states that the two of them can cooperate. Yang finds the proposal strange, remembering that they are still enemies, and tries to discover that woman's true intentions. Minyoung then reveals that Chu Tianchen has also placed a restriction on her body and promises to give Yang everything she possesses if he solves her problem and frees her from that control. The provocative way she presents the proposal leaves Yang flustered, while Ying is even more shocked and considers the scene far too inappropriate for children to see. Minyoung takes the opportunity to move closer to him and show him where the restriction is hidden, forcing the protagonist to personally examine the mark that needs to be removed. Outside, Chu Tianchen continues pressuring Lin Lang to surrender in order to avoid suffering, but the Empress immediately refuses. At that moment, Minyoung projects her voice beyond the Sumeru space and provokes Lin Lang, insinuating that Yang is far too fragile and that perhaps in the future she will need to find a real man. The Empress becomes even more furious and demands to know what that shameless vixen has done to her husband. Convinced that Yang will not survive, Chu Tianchen repeats that no one has ever managed to escape Yin Minyoung's Sumeru space alive. However, Yang unexpectedly reappears after leaving the Sumeru space and strikes Chu Tianchen by surprise, seriously injuring him. Chu Tianchen becomes furious and accuses Yang and Yin Minyoung of acting despicably, but the protagonist essentially replies that using dirty methods against a despicable villain is more than fair. He also reminds him that Chu Tianchen has repeatedly sent people to harass and pursue Lin Lang, and that the sword strike he has just delivered is already far too merciful. Chu Tianchen is shocked by the severity of the wound, thinks that he nearly died, and realizes that he only survived because his heart is not located in the normal position. At the same time, he tries to understand what technique Yang used to approach him without being noticed. As soon as she sees her husband return, Lin Lang finally breathes a sigh of relief, but she is still extremely worried. She wants to know whether Yin Minyoung has done anything to him and inwardly has already decided that she will never let that woman walk away unharmed if she has truly laid a hand on Yang. The protagonist reassures her, saying that the useless space has already been dealt with and that everything remains under control. Earlier, inside the space, Yang ends up turning away from Yin Minyoung because the situation in front of him is far too exposed and even somewhat embarrassing. Ying even scolds him, asking him to show at least a minimum amount of decency. It is then that Minyoung reveals her origins. She explains that her original identity belongs to the royal family of the Swan Yue dynasty, but she eventually fell victim to a trap set by the old ancestor of the Chu family. After that, she was marked with a seal, reduced to the status of a prisoner, and even had everything she owned taken away by the Chu family. Upon hearing this, Yang concludes that Chu Tianchen and his lineage are basically rebellious traitors within their own dynasty, which makes the entire situation even more interesting. Even so, before helping her, he gets straight to the point and asks what he will gain in return for removing the seal. Yin Minyoung realizes that he is extremely calculating, but replies that if he truly breaks the restriction controlling her, everything she possesses can be offered to him. With the agreement established, Yang decides to act. He uses his technique to remove the seal, and Yin Minyoung is finally freed from the restriction binding her. The system then rewards him for helping another person remove a seal, granting him a saint-grade cultivation technique called the Great Formless Void Art. Yang thinks that although the system is stingy, it has actually been working quite hard lately. At first, he thinks the new technique is merely related to transformation or simple invisibility, But Ying corrects him and explains that after activating it, no one below the saint level will be able to detect his movements, and he also cannot be struck while in that hidden state. After understanding the technique's true value, Yang decides to save it so he can later surprise the so-called Emperor of Xuan Yue. In the meantime, he notices that Lin Lang's clothes have been torn during the battle and immediately redirects his anger toward Chu Tianchen. To Yang, that alone is enough to justify killing the enemy without mercy. Chu Tianchen, however, shows no fear. On the contrary, he declares that Yang should have cut off his head with the first attack because now he still has one final trump card to reveal. He then activates the so-called foundation of the Chu family, forcibly raising his cultivation from the peak of the Great Emperor realm to half a step into the Supreme realm. His aura erupts. The sky fills with golden energy and an enormous power condenses behind him, making it clear that he's betting everything on this escalation. Yang looks down on the scene and treats Chu Tianchen as trash, sustained by pills and external tricks, unworthy of acting arrogant before him. The battlefield then becomes tense once again, with the enemy descending surrounded by energy and preparing for another direct confrontation. The protagonist executes the Heavenly Evolution 9 Tribulations sword, using Purgatory Annihilation, while his opponent responds with the Black Netherworld Evil Palm and its Dark Abyss Void Rift. The two techniques collide violently, engulfing the battlefield in a massive explosion of energy. When Yang disappears amid the impact, Lin Lang becomes desperate and tries to figure out where her husband has gone. Chu Tianchen, believing that his attack has worked, begins laughing and mocks the protagonist, saying that he overestimated Yang's abilities and that Yang did not even manage to withstand a single one of his attacks. However, Yang's voice sounds immediately afterward. He asks whether Chu Tianchen truly believes that he can kill him with a single move, and ridicules his naivety, even wondering how someone so foolish managed to reach such a high position. Without giving the enemy time to react, the protagonist attacks again with the Heavenly Evolution 9 Tribulations sword, this time using the God and Demon Crusher. Countless golden beams tear across the sky and strike Chu Tianchen directly, breaking through his defenses and causing him to spit blood. Chu Tianchen can only scream in pain as he is repeatedly sent flying through the air. Yang then appears in front of him and reminds him that, moments earlier, the self-proclaimed expert half a step into the Supreme Realm was acting extremely arrogantly. Now, however, he has been reduced to a miserable state and looks no better than a dead dog. At that moment, the protagonist tears off Chu Tianchen's arm as a warning. Realizing that he is going to be killed, Chu Tianchen begs Old Nether to come save him. The elder becomes irritated by his uselessness, but concludes that he cannot abandon him because Chu Tianchen is still part of the old ancestors' plans. Because of that, he interrupts his battle with Xuanqi and tries to rush toward the Emperor using the Black Netherworld Evil Palm, along with the Overwhelming Fortune technique. Old Nether still has a great distance to cover and knows that he has to arrive in time, or all of the ancestors' plans will be ruined. Yang, however, shows no intention of sparing Chu Tianchen. The protagonist states that among all the choices available to him, that man has repeatedly insisted on provoking him. Therefore, he advises him to learn to become a better person in his next life. Before Old Nether can reach them, Yang delivers the final blow and pierces through Chu Tianchen, killing him in front of everyone. The elder is horrified because now he has no idea how he will explain to the old ancestor that the emperor has died under his watch. Furious, Old Nether accuses Yang of committing an atrocity and asks whether he understands who he has just killed, reminding him that Chu Tianchen is the emperor of the Xuan Yue dynasty. The protagonist replies that it makes no difference, because anyone who dares to provoke him will meet the same fate. Furthermore, Chu Tianchen usurped the throne, so his death can merely be considered the execution of heavenly justice. The elder warns Yang not to let arrogance control him and claims that the true heritage of the Chu family is far beyond his comprehension. The protagonist becomes even more interested and decides to personally discover just how deep that filthy family's foundation truly runs. Thus, he declares that he will test the full extent of the Chu clan's resources that very day. Offended, Old Nether vows to crush his bones and scatter his ashes to avenge Chu Tianchen. Inwardly, however, he is extremely cautious. The elder cannot understand Yang's true cultivation level because even Chu Tianchen, after artificially raising his strength, was completely overwhelmed in a one-sided battle. But at that moment, the protagonist activates the astral art of heaven and earth and the wine spirit dragon transformation art. An enormous golden manifestation appears behind him, accompanied by the figure of a spiritual dragon, and his cultivation surges from the 6th to the 9th level of the Great Emperor realm. Shortly before the expedition, Old Nether had questioned the old ancestor of the Chu family about the need to personally accompany Chu Tianchen in capturing Ye Linlong. In his view, the Great Shang dynasty possessed very few experts of the Great Emperor realm and did not justify such caution. The ancestor, however, had become irritated and asked whether they expected him to personally go and bring Linlang back. Old Nether had immediately apologized and promised to depart without delay, guaranteeing that he would help Chu Tianchen capture the Empress and bring her back. The ancestor had explained that he needed Linlong's innate phoenix sacred body to break through his bottleneck, reach the next realm, and extend his lifespan. Since any delay could cause problems, he had ordered the mission to begin immediately and emphasized that Chu Tianchen had to return alive at all costs. Back in the present, after Chu Tianchen's death, Old Nether realizes that his situation has become desperate. Staying there is dangerous, but returning without the Emperor means almost certain death at the hands of the ancestor. Thus, he concludes that his only option is to flee and hide until the old man finally dies. After that, he intends to take control of the Chu family in the eastern continent. To create an opportunity to escape, the elder unleashes the black netherworld evil palm, using the technique of splitting the clouds and returning the waves. Yang decides to face the attack head-on and declares that he wants to see what abilities an old fossil with practically 1 foot in the grave still possesses. Ying becomes worried and reminds him that his opponent is an expert half a step into the Supreme Realm. When the attack explodes, an enormous darkness completely obscures Yang's vision. The protagonist then realizes that it is nothing more than a distraction and acknowledges that the old man is far more cunning than he appears. Taking advantage of the cover, Old Nether activates the evil Netherworld Shadow Escape and tries to leave the battlefield before Yang understands what is happening. Even so, the protagonist remains calm and assures everyone that he will not be able to escape. Shortly afterward, Yang locates the fugitive and declares that he has finally caught him. Using the Tao of strategy, Yang unleashes the absolute boundary of flying chains. The elder becomes furious and accuses the protagonist of being extremely calculating, using every possible trick just to kill him. Yang replies that he is giving himself far too much credit. In reality, an enemy of his level does not even deserve for the protagonist to use his true abilities. With no other option, Old Nether decides to risk everything. He sacrifices his own cultivation foundation and forcibly ascends from half a step into the Supreme Realm to the first level of the Supreme Realm. A violent red aura erupts from his body, spreading pressure so intense that everyone around him is affected. Linlang is shocked when she feels that power and realizes that it is the characteristic pressure of a Supreme Realm expert. Yin Mainyang mocks the Empress's surprise, treating her like an ignorant person from a small border nation. However, inwardly, even she becomes suspicious when she realizes that the old man from the Chu family has forced such an extreme breakthrough. Since her control seal has already been removed, Mainyang begins considering fleeing and finding somewhere to hide before the battle becomes even worse. At the same time, Ying asks whether she should intervene, since the enemy has reached the Supreme Realm. Yang refuses her help and explains that Old Nether has destroyed his own foundation in order to achieve that breakthrough. Therefore, even though he has temporarily reached the Supreme Realm, he is still far from being a genuine expert at that level. Consumed by rage and knowing that he probably will not survive, the elder swears to risk everything to drag Yang down to hell with him. Xuanji immediately places herself between the two and declares that as long as she remains there, no one will take even a single step toward her master. Yang, however, realizes that the opponent has completely lost his reason and warns that Xuanji could be at a disadvantage if she insists on facing him in that state. She becomes frustrated that she has still failed to defeat even one enemy for her master, but Yang assures her that she has already done her best and orders her to step back, saying that he will personally deal with the old man. Xuanji obediently agrees. Yang then provokes Old Nether, telling him to stop shouting and hurry over to meet his death. The elder replies that he wants to see how that arrogant young man will withstand an attack launched with the full strength of someone in the Supreme Realm. Gathering all the energy obtained through his forced breakthrough, Old Nether manifests a gigantic, demonic figure surrounded by a scarlet formation. He then condenses his power into an enormous red palm and launches it directly at Yang, betting his entire life on one final devastating attack. Old Nether's final strike descends with such force that Linlang screams for her husband, believing that Yang has been destroyed. The elder also thinks he has won and boasts that his palm has not left even a trace of his opponent, using that as proof of the enormous difference between their cultivation levels. However, Yang reappears completely unharmed behind him and merely laments that the old man continues acting like an idiot even in the face of imminent death. Old Nether is horrified when he realizes that his attack has passed through a false manifestation and tries to understand what kind of technique it is. Yang refuses to explain, stating that someone like him does not even deserve to know the method he has used. With the battle over, Lin Lang rushes worriedly toward her husband and asks whether he has truly not been injured by that palm, because she watched everything with her heart in her throat. Xuanji also wants to examine him, but Yang assures them that he is perfectly fine and asks them to stop making such a fuss. To him, the confrontation has been a completely one-sided victory. Watching everything, Yin Minyoung becomes even more impressed. She considers Yang handsome, powerful, and seemingly limitless, concluding that he will be an excellent support to rely on in the future. Ying, on the other hand, interrupts the moment to inform him that the mission rewards have still not been calculated. Yang finds the delay strange and jokes that perhaps she is on her period again, causing the little assistant to become irritated and fire back with a sarcastic remark. Shortly afterward, the system begins reacting in a way similar to a previous occasion. Yang suspects that the reward might be another Heavenly Tao fragment, and Ying confirms his suspicion with enormous excitement, announcing that they have obtained the second fragment. The system then asks him to install it immediately to discover what changes it will produce. Yang takes the opportunity to tease her, after realizing that there are things in the world that even she does not know. Ying explains that the Heavenly Tao is composed of the fundamental laws of that world itself and represents a supreme existence. Since not all of the system's permissions have been unlocked yet, she is neither completely omniscient nor omnipotent. Yang complains that if he had known that from the beginning, he would not have allowed her to fool him so many times. When the fragment is integrated, the Tao of strategy evolves from the 9th grade, preserving incompetence, to the 8th grade, appearing foolish. At the same time, Yang advances from the 9th level of the Great Emperor realm to the peak of that realm. Ying celebrates intensely both the cultivation breakthrough and the new progress in the Heavenly Tao. Yang is pleased to have finally reached the peak of the Great Emperor realm, although at first he finds the name appearing foolish ridiculous. Ying then explains that the ability does not mean behaving like an actual idiot. Its function is to completely conceal the user's realm and power, preventing any cultivator below the saint level from discovering their true strength. Upon understanding the effect, Yang becomes excited by the possibility of pretending to be weak and then crushing unsuspecting opponents. He even imagines hiding his cultivation and pretending to be a simple foundation establishment novice while defeating experts far above him, finding the idea extremely entertaining. He then orders Xuanji to collect all the equipment, treasures, and valuable objects left behind by the two defeated enemies, promising to reward her generously afterward. She accepts the task enthusiastically and immediately goes to loot the bodies. Lin Lang, however, is still worried about her husband and once again asks whether he has truly suffered no injuries during such a violent battle. Yang repeats that he has not been injured at all and has simply crushed his opponents. Yin Minyoung then takes the opportunity to approach him and act even more seductively, saying that she was extremely worried and that Yang's brave and dominant appearance has made her heart race. Lin Lang cannot stand seeing Yin Minyoung get too close to Yang and immediately tells her to stay away from her husband. Minyoung responds provocatively, insinuating that the Empress does not trust her own husband. But Lin Lang makes it clear that she understands her intentions perfectly and accuses her of deliberately trying to seduce Yang. The red-haired woman then admits, without much shame, that she truly intends to offer herself as repayment for him saving her life. That only makes Lin Lang even angrier, and she threatens to grind Minyoung's bones to dust if she dares touch Yang. Minyoung, however, does not back down and even reminds her that she is at the 8th stage of the Great Emperor realm, attempting to intimidate the Empress. Seeing the two women ready to fight because of him, Yang becomes extremely uncomfortable and decides it would be better to flee the scene, saying that he will go see how Xuanji is handling the collection of the spoils. Inwardly, he only thinks that arguments between women are far too frightening and that the best option is to escape quickly. Ying is amused to see that even he has weaknesses of that kind. Shortly afterward, Xuanji returns and reports that she has already taken everything of value from the defeated enemies. Yang examines the items and complains about the poverty of the Xuan Yue dynasty, saying that among all their belongings there is only one Sant-level secret manual, while the rest is nothing but Emperor-level trash. He then orders Xuanji to store everything carefully and find an opportunity to send the items to the spiritual sword sect. She accepts the order without hesitation. Meanwhile, the people of the Great Shang dynasty are already discussing what has happened in the streets. News of the Xuan Yue Emperor's death within the dynasty's territory is already spreading, yet many people do not even seem frightened. On the contrary, they remember that the Empress has already decreed a general amnesty and tax exemption. When some wonder whether the enemy nation will come seeking revenge, others confidently reply that with the national lord of the great Shang dynasty there, it is the Xuan Yue dynasty that should be worried. Later, in a more controlled environment, Yin Minyoung is brought before the group and pretends not to understand why Yang and Lin Lang are treating her with such caution. Lin Lang does not fall for the provocation and reminds her that she is still a suspect directly connected to the invasion of the great Shang dynasty, demanding that she reveal everything she knows if she does not want to rot in prison. Even in that situation, Minyoung continues using her suggestive manner and implies that the Empress is merely taking advantage of the opportunity to vent her jealousy. When Lin Lang asks for Yang's opinion, he makes it clear that he also thinks it would be better for her to cooperate. The red-haired woman still tries to turn the situation into another ambiguous game, implying that she will accept any setting or method, but Yang interrupts her and asks her to maintain at least a little decorum. From that point on, Lin Lang begins interrogating her seriously. Minyoung reveals that, just as many suspected, she is the legitimate royal heir of the Zhuan Yue dynasty, and the Empress then wants to know exactly how the Chu family managed to usurp the throne. Yin Minyoung explains that around 600 years earlier, she went out to cultivate alone, and during that period her imperial father took in the Chu family. In just over a century, they gradually occupied increasingly important positions, hollowed out the authority of the imperial court, and even managed to manipulate her father to the point of arranging her marriage to Chu Tianchen. During the engagement banquet, the old ancestor of the Chu family, who had already been waiting for the right moment, attacked together with the clan elders. Her imperial father was killed, she was captured and turned into a prisoner, and thus the Chu family completely seized control of the Xuan Yue dynasty. Upon hearing the story, Yang thinks that both Yin Minyoung and her father were far too careless to allow the situation to reach that point, and even finds the entire sequence of betrayal during an engagement absurdly cliché. Even so, he takes the opportunity to get to the main point and asks about the Chu family's true current strength. Minyoung replies that thanks to Yang's actions, half of the clan's main experts have already been eliminated since Chu Tianchen and Chu Shiming are dead. According to her, among the members who can still be considered truly dangerous, basically only Chu Shixuan and that monstrous old ancestor remain. She also explains that the old ancestor's cultivation level is not much higher than Chu Shixuan's. Upon hearing this, Lin Lang immediately concludes that if the Chu family has been reduced to those two old men, then the best course of action is to eliminate them once and for all. Yang is surprised by how quickly she reaches that decision and tries to make her reconsider. Inwardly, he even admits that the Chu family truly needs to be destroyed, but he considers turning it into a complete massacre of the clan extremely troublesome, since any survivor could end up bringing a long chain of karmic problems afterward. Lin Lang, however, has already made up her mind. Without hesitation, she decrees that Yang will receive the title of Grand Marshal of all forces under heaven, and that, on an auspicious day, he will formally assume command and lead an expedition against the Xuan Yue dynasty. Yang is stunned by how quickly things have escalated and thinks that his wife is an empress completely obsessed with battles, because the conversation started with destroying the Chu family and within moments has already turned into a war to destroy an entire dynasty. Yin Minyoung, meanwhile, becomes emotional in the most inconvenient way possible. She interprets the decision as though Yang is willing to launch an entire national war because of her, and becomes even more enchanted. Irritated by the way she keeps stirring things up, Yang finally loses patience and tells her to shut up and stop causing trouble behind the scenes. Lin Lang reassures Yin Minyoung and promises that she will avenge all the hatred she has accumulated against the Chu family. Minyoung thanks her with a smile, but the two women are hiding very different intentions. Behind her apparent goodwill, Lin Lang is determined to crush the Zhuan Yue dynasty and completely destroy that seductive vixen's fantasies about Yang. Yin Minyoung, meanwhile, thinks that after destroying the Chu family and reclaiming the dynasty, she will hand the entire country over to Yang and thus finally stand on equal footing with Lin Lang. Meanwhile, Yang himself only thinks that after finishing off the Chu family and conquering the Zhuan Yue dynasty, perhaps he can finally take a long vacation. Ying is amused when she realizes that all of this promises to become a great spectacle, but Yang sighs and tries to argue that they can wait a few days before attacking Zhuan Yue, since he is still on his honeymoon. Lin Lang, however, has no idea what a honeymoon is and considers the comment irrelevant. To her, the situation is simple. Chu Tianchen has just died. The Zhuan Yue dynasty has to be in complete chaos, and this is the best possible moment to act. Without leaving any room for discussion, she orders the attendants to help Yang change his clothes so that he will not miss the auspicious hour of the investiture ceremony. Desperate, Yang even tries to escape by claiming social anxiety and asking not to attend. But Lin Lang immediately dismisses the excuse and reminds him that he is about to be appointed supreme commander of all the armed forces. At the same time, in the capital of the Xuan Yue dynasty, the court is plunged into a fierce succession dispute. Some argue that the first prince is the most suitable to inherit the throne because he has been assisting the emperor for a long time, while others insist that the second prince is stronger and should be brought back immediately to stabilize the country. Some even pressure Prime Minister Zhuo Wenyuan to support one side, but he explodes in anger when he sees everyone fighting before they even understand who truly controls the dynasty at that moment. It is then that Chu Tianda appears and declares that the true ruler of Xuan Yue is now him. The officials are shocked and denounce it as a clear usurpation because he is merely the son of a concubine and has nowhere near the legitimacy required to touch the throne. Even so, Chu Tianda orders the enthronement ceremony to begin immediately so that he can seize complete control of the dynasty. When the opponents protest, one of them asks the ancestor how they should deal with those people, and Chu Shixuan coldly replies that they should all be killed. Immediately afterward, the repression begins brutally with mutilations and terror, until Chu Tianda sits on the throne and demands that everyone declare who supports him and who opposes him. Faced with the violence, the crowd eventually bows and begins hailing the new emperor. Back in the Great Shang dynasty, the ceremony of sacrifice to heaven is held on a grand scale. The people and officials celebrate Lin Lang and Yang. Wu Ye wonders whether the Grand Preceptor will take him along this time. Qingyao thinks that with the Grand Preceptor's new promotion, the status of the Lingjun sect will rise even further. Xuanji, meanwhile, can only think that her master looks even more handsome than he did the day before. Yin Mingyang becomes frustrated because once again all the attention is falling on Lin Lang. While the advisor conducts the ceremony, Yang only thinks about how painfully long everything seems and wishes it would end as soon as possible. After the ritual is completed, it is time for the official declaration to be read. Lin Lang then begins publicly proclaiming the crimes of the Xuan Yue dynasty, first pointing out its invasion of the Great Shang dynasty's borders and disregard for diplomacy, and then its tyrannical rule, which has pushed the suffering of the people to the extreme. After finishing that part, she still shows some guilt for placing such a heavy responsibility on Yang immediately after their marriage. Yang tries to comfort her and says that he will resolve everything quickly, believing that he can still return in time to enjoy their honeymoon. Even so, inwardly, he is already suffering because now he has to lead the oath-taking ceremony and has no idea what to say. Seizing the opportunity, Ying appears with another one of her absurd ideas and suggests that he try a new AI assistant capable of solving all his problems and even writing a 5,000-word oath in just 1 second. Yang immediately rejects the suggestion, saying that he is merely a lazy person and not someone incapable of acting on his own, while also complaining that no sane person would want to read such an enormous text on an occasion like that. Faced with his refusal, Ying agrees to cancel the idea immediately. Standing before the assembled army, Yang concludes that the Xuan Yue dynasty has to be conquered with no alternative. To justify the campaign, he recalls that he and Lin Lang were merely enjoying their wedding banquet when the enemies invaded the Great Shang dynasty and tried to take away the bride. In his view, it will only be possible to live peacefully in a world where Xuan Yue no longer exists. Officially assuming command of the armed forces, Yang raises the military seal and orders the march to begin. The soldiers respond in unison, proclaiming that they will destroy the rebels and eradicate the Xuan Yue dynasty. Thus, around 200,000 men set out under the leadership of the national lord toward the enemy border. News quickly reaches the capital of Xuan Yue. Zhuo Wenyuan appears before the new emperor and reports that the Great Shang dynasty has mobilized 200,000 soldiers personally commanded by Yang and is preparing to cross the borders. Chu Tianda immediately dismisses the threat and considers it ridiculous to believe that only 200,000 men can destroy his entire dynasty. To him, the Great Shang dynasty is displaying completely unfounded confidence. Wenyuan tries to warn him that the problem is not merely the number of soldiers because Yang is an extremely ruthless and powerful warrior, capable of killing even the previous emperor. The new ruler, however, does not allow him to finish. Chu Tianda becomes irritated at being given advice and asks since when the minister has had the authority to lecture him. Faced with such arrogance, Wenyuan inwardly concludes that Chu Tianda is even worse than Chu Tianchen and that the Xuan Yue dynasty is probably already doomed. As punishment for his supposed insolence, Chu Tianda orders the prime minister to take command of 1 million soldiers, confront Yang, and crush the Great Shang army. Wenyuan is terrified when he realizes that he will once again have to face the man who eliminated the former emperor. Meanwhile, the great Shang troops advance with great enthusiasm. Many soldiers still cannot believe that the country, which was once constantly pressured by its enemies, has finally reached the point of launching a counterattack. They attribute this change to Yang's leadership and especially celebrate the fact that he killed Chu Tianchen. Some are already imagining that after the war they can return home, buy land, and start families. Yang, however, does not fully share their enthusiasm. When he thinks about the responsibility of managing provisions and supplies for 200,000 men, he finds the entire process extremely troublesome. To him, it would be much simpler to infiltrate enemy territory alone and directly eliminate every important member of the Chu family. The system detects his desire to manage an army and activates a new function called the Invincible War System. Yang is surprised and imagines that it might allow him to win battles as easily as someone commanding troops by clicking on a screen. Ying appears proudly and guarantees that there is nothing the new system cannot do. Shortly afterward, an interface shows the Great Shang dynasty fielding 500 men against the Xuan Yu dynasty's 3,000. Yang becomes indignant at the score and accuses the system of malfunctioning. After all, he has already reached the peak of the Great Emperor realm and refuses to accept being represented as the weaker side of the conflict. Ying explains that a war is not decided solely by the strength of one individual or the raw number of combatants. Various factors such as resources, territory, logistics, intelligence, and troop quality can determine the final outcome. Acknowledging that she is right, Yang wants to know what makes the system truly invincible. Ying then introduces some of its features: complete battlefield holograms, intelligent assistance for troop movements, secret intelligence reports, and several other military functions. Among the available options, Yang finds a section called the National War Arsenal and immediately becomes interested. Upon opening the catalog, he sees weapons resembling cannons and asks whether he can redeem them. Ying shows some concern, since this is a fantasy world and using artillery in a war between cultivators seems like a shameless form of cheating. Yang counters that a system called Invincible should not be concerned about fairness and demands a little more flexibility. Faced with his insistence, Ying grants him 100,000 war points and upgrades the shop module. Satisfied, the protagonist begins examining the new equipment. He finds the Divine Fire Thunder Cannon, which costs only 1,000 points per unit. Considering the price extremely low, he decides to buy 50 at once. However, he dislikes the appearance of the weapons, and even demands that the system provide customized skins to make them look better. Imagining the power of those 50 cannons on the battlefield, she concludes that the enemy army is about to go through a terrible time. While the Great Shang dynasty prepares its new artillery, the Zhuanyue military camp receives information about the enemy's advance. Inside the command tent, the officers report that the Great Shang's main force is less than 10 miles away and that, according to the scouts, the nearest group has a little over 100,000 soldiers. Some commanders become confident upon hearing the number. Since Zhuanyue's vanguard consists of 300,000 men, they believe they can easily swallow the enemy whole. Others, however, remember that the situation is still not entirely clear and that Yang himself is on the battlefield. Therefore, they suggest holding their position and waiting for the reinforcements led by the Prime Minister. General Gao Yuelin ignores the warnings. In his view, 300,000 soldiers against just over 100,000 represents an overwhelming advantage. Even if Yang is powerful, he cannot possibly kill every man in the Zhuanyue army by himself. An officer still tries to remind him that Wen Yuan has expressly ordered everyone not to act rashly before his arrival. Gao Yuelin, however, mocks the Prime Minister and declares that with the change of emperor, a new court has emerged. To him, Wen Yuan has long since lost his prestige and his orders no longer need to be obeyed. Convinced that he will secure a quick victory and claim all the credit, Gao Yuelin orders an immediate attack, promising to destroy the Great Shang troops before lunchtime. In the Great Shang camp, the war drums begin to sound. The commanders organize the ranks, raise the banners, and order the entire army to advance. As the Great Shang soldiers watch 300,000 elite Zhuanyue troops advance, many become apprehensive and wonder whether victory is truly possible, although they still trust that, at the very least, Yang will not allow them to suffer a humiliating defeat. Qingyao also brings news that the enemy is rapidly advancing with 300,000 men and wants to confirm whether victory is still possible, but Yang, calmly sitting and eating, displays complete confidence and essentially says that everything is under control. Inwardly, he even finds it convenient that Gao Yuelin is so obedient and impulsive because sending all his troops forward at once will make Yang's plans much easier. Ying, excited, praises Yang's tactical judgment and says she is eager to see how the battle unfolds. On the other side, as soon as the Great Sheng formation is ready, Gao Yuelin orders the archers to fire, planning to launch a full charge as soon as the enemy formation begins to collapse. A rain of arrows falls upon the Great Sheng troops, forcing the soldiers to hurriedly raise their shields. Even so, some panic, screams, and confusion break out, and Yang becomes irritated when he realizes that those recruits are losing their composure despite having a defensive formation. Seeing that there is no point insisting on discipline at that moment, he decides to turn the situation into a trap and orders a controlled retreat of 100 steps to fake a withdrawal. The front line begins retreating amid the chaos, causing Gao Yuelin to believe that the Great Sheng army is truly collapsing. Convinced that victory is already his, he orders all units to advance and crush the enemy. The Xuanyue soldiers then charge forward, shouting that they will slaughter and destroy the Great Sheng dynasty, while Yang, satisfied, thinks that it is almost too easy and that now they will finally learn what real warfare is. It is at that moment that he orders his Italian cannons to be brought forward. When those strange weapons appear on the battlefield, the Xuanyue soldiers become completely confused, unable to understand what they are. On the Great Sheng side, however, the soldiers activate the cannon's inscription seals and immediately open fire. The artillery erupts in rapid succession, launching devastating projectiles that strike the Xuanyue troops head-on, causing explosions, screams of pain, despair, and a complete collapse of the momentum behind their offensive. Gao Yuelin is shocked when he sees the absurd power of those weapons and cannot understand what kind of armament they are or how they can possess such immense destructive force. Realizing that the enemy army has entered a full retreat, Yang seizes the opportunity without hesitation, orders all Great Sheng units to advance, and commands the cannons to continue bombarding Xuanyue's rear lines in particular, turning their withdrawal into an even greater collapse. With the Xuanyue army completely disorganized, the Great Sheng troops advance to finish the massacre. The enemy soldiers try to flee in every direction while Gao Yuelin shouts for the cowards to hold their positions and forbids any retreat. Before Gao Yuelin can reorganize his forces, another projectile strikes him directly and causes a massive explosion. One of the Xuanyue soldiers refuses to believe what is happening and concludes that Yang can only be using some kind of demonic art. Watching the enemy collapse, Yang thinks those troops have been defeated even more easily than the weak opponents he faces in strategy games. Shortly afterward, the invincible war system confirms Gao Yuelin's death and announces the Great Sheng dynasty's complete victory. Ying also celebrates the tremendous success of their first battle, but Yang is surprised to discover that everything has already ended so quickly. Ying proudly explains that this is the natural result of her completely modified and invincible war system. Regardless of how many troops the enemy sends, Yang will be able to defeat them with ease. The protagonist accepts the explanation but immediately demands the battle reward, suspicious that the system might try to forget it again. The assistant assures him that she has already prepared an exclusive and unique reward. Yang becomes excited and asks to test it immediately, but Ying tries to warn him that it is a divine-level weapon and that he should handle it carefully. Meanwhile, the Great Sheng soldiers look over the devastated battlefield and discuss the terrifying power of the so-called cannon. They are grateful that Yang is on their side because they do not even want to imagine what would happen if those weapons were ever used against the Great Sheng dynasty itself. Shortly afterward, the officers order everyone to stop admiring the destruction and begin cleaning up the battlefield. Among the wounded enemies, there are still some who accuse Yang of cooperating with demonic forces from another world, claiming that weapons of that kind can never exist in their realm. Xuanji immediately silences the man with a strike and threatens to bury all the prisoners alive if they continue spreading such nonsense. Even so, inwardly she is frustrated because the enemy army has been wiped out so quickly that she has not even had the opportunity to participate in the battle. Shortly afterward, Yang calls for Xuanji, who runs over to him extremely excitedly. She believes that she will finally receive the mission of leading the next battle and thinks that this will be her chance to shine in front of her master. Yang, however, explains that it is not yet time for another confrontation, but that he has received a rather interesting weapon and intends to give it to her. When she sees the object, Xuanji is not impressed. The weapon is completely black, has a strange appearance, and seems far less comfortable than her spear. Yang then points toward a distant mountain wall and asks whether she is capable of destroying it from where they stand. After evaluating the distance, Xuanji admits that she cannot launch an attack with that kind of range using her current means. Yang reveals that in the next battle she will take that weapon with her and have the chance to demonstrate its power. Upon hearing this, Xuanji completely changes her attitude, becomes excited, and promises that she will not disappoint her master. Since the gift comes from Yang, she concludes that despite its unpleasant appearance, it has to be an extremely powerful weapon. While the Great Shang dynasty celebrates and collects the spoils, news of the defeat reaches the Xuan Yue forces. The officers are shocked to learn that the entire army has been annihilated. Wen Yuan considers the result absurd because even if 300,000 pigs had been abandoned on the battlefield, Yang would not have been able to kill them all in just 15 minutes using conventional methods. Faced with such an unbelievable defeat, those present begin to suspect that important information is being hidden from them, unable to understand that the Great Shang dynasty now possesses weapons capable of wiping out entire armies before close-quarters combat can even begin. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.